talk about protecting human life, we're talking about protecting conscious experiences. So when I look to see what ought to be protected in the womb, it's going to be some creature that is having, or at least capable of having, a conscious experience. The necessary parts in your brain that form to have conscious experiences form at around 20 to 24 weeks. So I think things like first trimester abortions are absolutely fine and permissible. That's my position on abortion.
You got it. We'll kick it over to Tree, who is also on the pro-choice side. Thanks for being with us, Tree.
All right. Thank you for having me. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old, and my mother got on welfare and taking custody of me. And we moved into a roach-infested apartment in one of the most dangerous ghettos in America, located in Anacostia, D.C. While there, I witnessed junkies overdosing, Black women and Black men shooting and stabbing each other, pimps physically abusing their women, along with women being sexually assaulted, and constant fights every day. Every now and then, while playing hide and seek with my friends, we would come across a dead body. But as a little girl, there were two things I had to do to stay alive in the hood. One, avoid predatory men who pursued young girls like me at the time to either trick us out or to just flat out rape us. And two, to survive the constant beatings of my mother. Saying that my mother beat me was just putting it lightly. She tortured me, and I'll spare you the details because I doubt seriously that you as an adult would survive what I did as a child. At the age of 11, I couldn't take it anymore and I ran away. And my father took custody of me, and that's when my life changed for the better. I was the first child on my father's side to attend college. On that day that I left for college, my father looked me in my eyes and said, "Keep your head in them books and your goddamn legs closed. If you get pregnant, you are no longer welcome back into my house and you'll be dead to me." Everything was going great until the spring of my sophomore year. I was dating a guy and we were very sexually active, but we used condoms and we was very careful. On one day while having intercourse, the condom broke and I freaked out. I called a local clinic and they told me to come back in 30 days to take a pregnancy test. On the 30th day, I went into the clinic to get a pregnancy test. However, this was not a Planned Parenthood clinic. This was a clinic funded by a Christian organization to convince Black women to avoid abortions. After giving the woman the cup of my urine, I was placed into a small room with a TV and a VCR and was told to watch a VHS tape called The Silent Scream, which was a pro-life propaganda piece that would pull the heartstrings of women, making them feel guilty about wanting to have an abortion. When the tape was over, the counselor came into my room with a box of Kleenex tissue, and she was shocked to see that my face was just as dry as was then before I even entered the room. While sitting there at the desk, she said that she had my test results back. And she said, "Now, before I share your test results, I want you to know, after watching that video, knowing that the test could come back positive and you could be pregnant, do you still want to kill your baby? Do you want to go to hell? Do you want your baby to go to heaven while you meet the devil?" I looked that white woman in her eyes and I said, "Lady, I'd rather go to hell than to live on earth as a poor Black woman." She got up, got my test results, and I wasn't pregnant. But I want you all to know that if I was pregnant, I would not hesitate to get an abortion. So I want to ask my opponents, instead of going for banning abortions, how about you do the following first? Eliminate child poverty, improve the maternity leave here in America, improve Medicaid and Medicare to help and also help fund health facilities that will help lower the maternal mortality rate among Black women, who, by the way, have the highest mortality rate than any other race in America, and improve the foster care in America, just to name a few. Why aren't you fixing these problems first instead of adding to it by trying to ban abortions? I yield.
You got it. Thank you very much for those opening statements from the pro-choice side. We're going to kick it over to Rachel and Kendon for their openings as well. If it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, folks, we're a neutral channel hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. We hope you feel welcome no matter what walk of life you are from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because we have plenty more juicy debates coming up in the future. With that, Rachel and Kendon, thanks so much for being with us. The floor is all yours.
Do you want to go for it, Rachel?
Sure, I'll go for it. Tree gave a really compelling personal anecdote there. And I think that what she proved is that even children who are born in the worst of circumstances can make a really fantastic life for themselves, and that they're valuable and their life has meaning, and they can grow up to affect the world in a really wonderful and positive way, just like she has. I'm not going to take that angle on this. I'm going to kind of stick to a more logical, rational type of argumentation here. Which is to say that if you look at it historically, abortion was something that 100 years ago, when it was first legalized in the USSR, was supposed to be temporary. It was considered a stopgap measure until birth control would be legal and widely available. And then it was generally believed that abortion would be safe, legal, and rare. If you're my age, I'm 41 years old, you might remember the propaganda of the 80s and 90s was that abortion was a necessary evil, and the phrase was safe, legal, and rare. We're 100 years into birth control being legal. It's widely available, super cheap and or free for almost anyone. You can walk into a clinic and get birth control, usually for free. You can get condoms for free from health centers all over the place. You can get a prescription from Medicaid and get a $4 a month prescription for abortion or for birth control pills. We have 18 plus well-tested forms of birth control, yet abortion is still extremely popular. It hasn't gone away. It hasn't become safe, legal, and rare. In fact, now the argument is people want absolutely no limitations on it whatsoever. We have shout your abortion. We have people who are proud to have abortions. We have people who want to tell you how they've had multiple abortions and see it as like a fight the patriarchy kind of thing to have an abortion. You're pushing back against the system by doing this. The problem with that is that it does not fight back against the system. It doesn't push back against anything. It's actually very conducive to the system. If you have a problem with, things like that, abortion actually is a eugenics industry at this point. In the USSR, when they made abortion free in state hospitals without any restrictions between 1920 and 1935, it got so bad that they got to the point where Stalin, when he took power, had to make abortion illegal again because you had 3 abortions for every 1 live birth in Russia, and the birth rate plummeted. And this was after they'd already been through World War I and a famine, and it was clear that they were not going to survive as a nation unless they did something to stop abortion. We could easily end up in that situation again if we do what the far left wants or what abortion advocates want, which is it's a woman's choice up until the baby is born. So I don't think there's any historical evidence that abortion is helpful. I don't think there's an argument that it helps babies. This argument that, your life isn't worth something if you're going to be poor or have a really rough time of it. And believe me, we have a lot of sympathy for those situations. I was in situations like that myself. However, there's more to life than that. So my position is that it's a human life from conception, and that you wouldn't have to kill the baby if it wasn't murder. So
we'll kick it over to Kendon as well.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Kendon Farr. So much like Rachel, I'm not so much a pro-life as anti-choice. I don't believe that any human agency should decide whether an individual human life should end arbitrarily. I've noticed as well, whenever we talk about this issue, or whenever one talks about this issue, a lot of the terms that we use are euphemistic. The word abortion is actually the wrong word. Abortion is another word for miscarriage. What we're actually describing is a termination, which is more honest because we're terminating a life before it's truly emerged from the womb and flourished. We also refer to clumps of cells as opposed to fetus or baby, tied to anesthetize, is that the right word? Sort of to soften the blow, to massage the truth. It destroys human life, but not just human life, but all life chances, any impact that a human being might have. And I noticed that the personal autonomy argument only reapplies in this issue. My body, my choice. You very rarely hear that phrase in any other context. Unlike death, I don't really care when the baby becomes conscious or not, because eventually, if left to its own devices, if it's a healthy, normal pregnancy, it will become conscious. So I'm mindful of the fact that consciousness is an inevitable part of the growth within the womb. It appears to me that the pro-choice advocacy is mainly economic rather than moral. Abortion is seen as the cheaper option, and this is where I want to tap into what Tree was saying earlier. Now, Tree's obviously given us a harrowing story, and I have genuine sympathy for her, and she's obviously come up hard, and I respect that. She talked about how, instead of banning abortions, why don't we improve the welfare system and healthcare provision for women and things like that? As someone who lives in northwest England, and as someone who has studied the American American healthcare system quite intently. It's my opinion that the healthcare system in your country is a joke. No offense to any Americans listening. The problem is that because abortion is no longer just safe, legal, and rare, it's as common as cookies. There's no incentive to improve any of your welfare systems because it's cheaper simply to kill the baby. In the same way, there's no, it's the difference between building shelters for the homeless and exterminating the homeless. Both would solve the problem of homelessness, but one of them is brutal and it's unconscionable. For me, abortion is unconscionable. You don't need to improve food stamps or, women's shelters or anything like that if there's no baby to feed. And I think that's the reason why a lot of pro-choice activists take that position, at least in politics. That's kind of an opening statement. That's my ramble over. I'll kick it over to somebody else.
So I would like to ask Rachel, I want to say that don't look at my story as a typical thing. I am not the norm. I'm very rare. A lot of children die in the hood through stray bullets or through the abuse of their own parents. As a matter of fact, the reason I just spared this because I didn't have that much, but the reason why I ran away is because I began to get taller. And as I get, my father's 6'7" and I'm 6'3". So my mother's 5'1". So I began to have a growth sprout and I began to get stronger. And I got tired of those beatings, those horrific beatings. And one day I just grabbed the belt that my mom used in the belt buckle. And the way she looked at me, that was like the worst beating I ever got. And I thought she was going to kill me. But in my head, because the ghetto has raised me in such a hard way, I thought, well, I'll kill my mother before she kills me. And I thought, well, because I was a Christian at the time, let me run away. Let me run away so I don't go to jail or I won't die from my mother trying to kill me. Because eventually she said, we have a thing in the Black community that Black parents tell to their children, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out. That's how they feel. And it has happened many times. So don't look at my situation as something that's the norm. It's not the norm. Also, I want to address your argument in reference to birth control. Birth control has been going on for centuries. You're pagan, right? Somebody was telling me you practiced a pagan religion. Rachel? No?
Sorry. Oh, no, I'm Orthodox Christian.
Okay, you're Orthodox. Oh, well, that makes it easier. Well, why is it that God is allowed to kill babies, but I'm not?
Well, to address your argument here, just because, your story is very emotional, it's very harrowing, but we can't base an entire debate of ethics over, my personal story, yours, Destiny's, or Kendon's. And although suffering is a reality of life, we're never going to eliminate suffering. You're never going to completely eliminate poverty, disease, abuse, or suffering. And
I eliminated my suffering if I had an abortion, I would have eliminated my suffering if I had an abortion.
Well, but to say that the way to solve these problems is to just kill babies before they're born is a very eugenic sort of statement. To say that it would be better for them to be dead than to grow up in poverty. First of all, I wouldn't.
How is eugenics equivalent to an income situation?
Well, that's exactly what Margaret Sanger proposed, was that, these people are
She did
uneducated.
that because she thought Blacks were inferior. She thought we were subhuman. That's the reason why Margaret Sanger did that.
You're making the argument that it would be better for people to be dead than to be poor or suffer. No. And I'm saying that you can't eliminate suffering.
No, my argument is that I have dominion over what's going on in my uterus, and nothing within my uterus have more dominion over me. I am, that's why I thought she was a god. I thought she was pagan because I was going to bring the goddess and the god situation in there. But since you are religious, I'm just saying, God don't have no problem with abortions, but let me just say this. There was no such thing as abortion during the biblical time because abortion is a medical procedure. There was lots of miscarriages and it was straight out just God killing, like after you give birth, like God just killing children, just straight up killing children. So I'm saying, obviously, God does not have a problem with just killing children after they're born. Why would he? And there's also scriptures in the Bible where he also have women to drink a potion that gives you a miscarriage. So if there's no problem with having miscarriages and God killing children, why is it a problem for me?
I'm not making a religious, I am Christian, but I'm not making a religious argument. I'm making a logical argument, which is that you don't stop suffering. You don't end suffering by killing people before they can live. By that logic, it would make sense to just wipe out the planet. Then we end suffering. Just kill all the homeless. Just kill all the drug addicts. Yeah,
it's a false comparison because there's something growing inside my uterus. Okay, and
yes, and that thing is a person. So at what point does point does the fetus? What point does the baby inside your uterus have bodily autonomy? Because you're making
when
a
it can
bodily
survive
autonomy.
outside my uterus.
Okay, but at one point you couldn't survive outside someone else's uterus.
Oh well, here's that. You asked me a question, I answered it. I answered it. It has an autonomy when it can survive outside my uterus. Usually when it's like 5 months, right? It's usually when it's 5 months and above, right?
That argument also doesn't make sense, and here's why. Because when a baby is viable at 22 weeks, it still can't survive without intense round-the-clock care until it's what? I mean, at what point do we no longer need people to survive? Are we allowed to kill everyone before they're 16, before they're 18?
If you depend upon my body to survive, I get to make the rules. If you survive, if you are dependent upon me, my body, my womb, in order to survive, I dictate the rules. What I say goes.
Okay, Tree, but that logic would have to apply to a baby who was born at term at 9 months. When that baby is born, if the mother does not feed it, it dies. No. Yes, it's the exact same argument.
No. Baby can be fed
logically, it's the same argument.
No, because a lot of women can't lactate, okay?
But someone has to feed it.
Exactly.
It's dependent on someone.
But it does.
So that person can say, look, if I don't feed you, you get to die. And that is a thing. There are people who do argue that.
Wrong. Other people can feed the baby. It's not, we have a thing called, there's a community to raise a child.
But it depends on someone, right?
So if the community. You're saying that if I died after giving childbirth and my child lives, you're saying that my child is going to die too because mommy's not there to breastfeed it. That's just silly.
No, hold on.
Let me just finish saying this. The child, you're just straight out lying. The child can be fed through other means, through formula, through a wet nurse, and through other means. The child does not
You're missing what I'm saying. I'm saying the logical extension of your argument is that nobody has a right to live until they are no longer dependent on someone else for survival.
That's not my argument. My argument is that if you can live outside. No, if you depend upon, here's my argument. Listen to me closely. If you depend upon my body to survive, I get to dictate the rules. And what I'm saying to you, like I said earlier, if the baby can, I think I did some research prior to coming here because I just was told today I can come. A child has a chance of surviving a preemie at 5 months. There is that. But so therefore, underneath that, and I'm willing to say, I like the heartbeat bill, but I also rather say in 3 months is a good number. But I'm not. There's no hill I'm willing to die on. What I'm saying is that I'm giving you the date where I'm giving you my cutoff period. The baby can survive outside my body. Good luck.
And give you a quick rejoinder, Rachel, but then we got to kick it over to Stephen. Stephen, you look especially enthralled. So go ahead, Rachel, and then we'll kick it over.
I'm letting them do the back and forth instead of, because for abortion arguments, there's like 12 different ways to approach it. So we keep like yoink it to get to like 20 different arguments. I'd rather let them run down the whole like.
Right. What I'm trying to do is show that what Tree is doing is making an arbitrary decision about when someone is autonomous and can live on their own, and that by logical extension, her argument means that when a baby is born, if the person who is charged with taking care of it says, look, this baby is a burden to me, it depends on me to live, I have to get up in the middle of the night, I have to feed it, or the group or the home that it's at, whoever is charged with taking care of a child, because children cannot survive without round-the-clock care for years after birth.
So if you're going to do that,
I'm telling you that logically, because I do debates all the time. I'm a student of like logical argumentation. If you're going to argue that you have the right to kill a human being because it depends on you for survival, then by logical extension, you would have to apply that to after birth abortion or after birth murder.
The baby does not have to depend upon a mother after she gave birth to it. And you know that. You're just being disingenuous.
I'm not. It's not disingenuous.
So how does the baby... So answer this question. I'm going to show how you're disingenuous. If the mother dies at birth, the baby going to die because there's nobody to give breast milk to it? The baby's going to die because there's nobody going to feed it?
Someone has to feed it, right?
Answer the question. If the
someone
mother dies,
doesn't feed it.
No, answer the question.
I did.
If the I'm
no, answering the question. Yes. This is perfectly valid logical argumentation.
When a mother dies, that nobody's going to take charge of the baby and feed it. That's what you're saying.
If someone doesn't, it will die.
But
and what you're
when
saying,
has that happened?
I'm telling you that logically,
that doesn't happen.
The
you're
argument
just lying.
you're making could be
just to be
used.
sure that we can hear each of you.
That doesn't happen. The baby is born. If the mother dies, somebody takes care of the baby. She's saying that if the baby doesn't die, if the mother decides that she doesn't want to breastfeed the baby's going to die. That does not happen.
That's not what I'm saying. You're not understanding. I'm sorry, but you don't understand logic. What I'm saying is that the argument you're making could be used for people to
illogical.
Say, if this baby depends on me to live, then it is within my rights to kill it at any point if I decide that's too burdensome. It is the logical extension of your argument, ma'am. I'm sorry that you don't understand arguments.
I did not say that. I said when the baby is outside with the baby outside. No, you don't understand my argument. And you know I'm questioning you. That's why you're reframing it. You're reframing my argument.
Hold on. If we have too much speaking over each other, we won't be able to hear either of you. Just want to be sure there's not.
No, she's reframing my argument. She's sitting up here saying, if you had the baby and if you gave birth to the baby and you don't feed the baby, then that means you can kill the baby. That's not exactly what I said. Okay.
She doesn't understand what I'm saying.
Hold on, because you won't answer this question.
I'll just yield. No, she didn't.
Yeah, no, yield because
if you know it. Let's let Tree finish and then we'll come back to you, Rachel.
I'm going to ask Kendon, and I'm going to make it plain again. If the mother dies after giving birth to the child, does that mean that the child dies because there's no one to take care of it?
That was not my argument.
That was your argument.
No.
I'm sorry, I thought you yelled. Why are you still talking? You said you yelled. I still hear blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm talking to Kendon. I'm trying to give somebody else to talk. Kendon, answer that question. If a woman dies after she gave birth to a baby, the baby's outside the womb, does the baby die too?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, the men can have it now.
Okay, fair enough. Do you want to go for it, Destiny? I mean, I'm not sure how to come back from that one, if I'm being honest.
So here, this is like my simple question for Kendon and Rachel. When do you consider a person dead?
The problem of death is a great philosophical conundrum. Even scientists find it difficult to identify death. We know symptoms of death. For example, obviously decomposition is the obvious one. But obviously the body doesn't die at once. It dies in stages. There's brain death. There's all sorts of things. So when do I consider a person dead? When they're 6 feet under and they've decomposed so thoroughly that not even a talented doctor could bring them back. That's the best. If
I were to chop a person's head off and I were to show you the body and it's not 6 feet under yet and hasn't begun to decompose, you would say that person is still alive?
No.
So with this I don't think that decomposition, we can decompose as living people. Frostbite might be an example.
Yeah, this is true. Living necrosis.
Yeah, and we're probably dead before decomposition happens. Probably dead before we're buried, hopefully. So so backing up, I think I'll try again. Reasonably, I understand there's a hot philosophical debate, maybe, I guess, around when a person is dead, but when we roughly consider a person to be dead? I think we've all kind of come to a consensus on this, societally speaking.
Yeah.
For me, it's when the soul is no longer in the body. But
where is the soul at?
Well, now that's a metaphysical question. That's a philosophical question that I'm sure you're not interested in, because I remember in our previous debate when I talked about souls, you scoffed. So,
well, sure, but how do you tell me when do you know the soul's left the body? Let me ask that. If I show you a corpse that's rotted 6 months, do you think that the soul is still in that body?
No.
Or if I show you somebody that just had a heart attack and they're on the table, is their soul still in their body?
No, I think I can grant you this without damaging my argument. Let's just say that death is after the heart has stopped and there's no more brain activity. Let's just grant you that and see where it goes.
Sure. Okay. I think that's fair. I think before we even get into sly debate tactics, I think people generally agree that death is when you cease having a conscious experience. It seems like that's not happening anymore. It used to be heart death. We found ways to keep the heart going a little bit. And as long as there's some sort of brain activity going on where it seems like you can have a conscious experience, people seem pretty comfortable to say you're either alive or dead based on that, right? If you're in a coma, why do we keep people in comas alive? Because hopefully they wake up. If we think that they're never going to wake up, then we pull the plug. So I think generally we say that death happens at the cessation of a conscious experience. So turning around, I would apply that to the beginning of life. If we don't say that life ends when the body is completely decomposed, when the body is completely destroyed, when some biological processes happen, when we say death happens when a conscious experience ends, well, when I look to the beginning to see, well, what is the start of our experience that we want to protect? I'd probably say it's the beginning of a conscious experience. I think that's the most consistent way to define the parts of life that we're interested in protecting.
But like the coma patient who has the possibility of a conscious experience in the future, so does the unborn child in the belly of the woman.
So the coma patients, so oftentimes people will bring up this potential of life, and they'll make an ontological error where they'll say the potential of life, therefore we should protect it, where they're trying to instantiate all of the concepts that go along, or all of the properties of life, they try to give to the potential of life. But that doesn't really work. We can talk about two different things. We can talk about life. We can talk about the potential of life. But the potential of life is not life. There is no other category where we would treat the potential of something as something else. The reason why we would protect a coma patient isn't because they have the potential of being alive. It's because they already were alive and they asserted some, hopefully, ability to stay alive, right? If you go into the hospital, unless you filled out a do not resuscitate, a DNR, people assume you probably want to be kept alive. So I reject the idea that because there's a potential of life, it ought to be granted the same ontological properties as a life itself, because I don't think anybody else treats any other category that way.
No, okay. Potential of life is not the phrase I should use. It's the potential of consciousness. The baby is still, the fetus is still alive, even if it's not capable of thinking and dreaming and planning its future. So
the potential of future consciousness developing is true, but there's not one yet. Nothing exists yet to assert itself. There's nothing to regard.
Yes, but there is it's an inevitable part of the development process.
Yeah, sure, but
if the pregnancy is healthy and viable and there are no complications, this clump of cells, to use that popular phrase, will eventually develop into a baby that is able to cogitate.
And it is inevitable that if I drop a seed on the ground, a tree will grow, but the seed is not a tree. And my hand holding the seed is not a tree. The potential or the future development of something is not the same thing as the stages preceding it. So it is true that oftentimes left to their own devices, a pregnancy will grow into something that will have a conscious experience. That conscious experience is not there yet. And you cannot treat the development of something in the future as the thing that exists now. They're two fundamentally different things.
Potentially, but the seed itself, I agree, the seed is not the tree, but the seed is tissue, whereas the sapling, or with the root system and everything, is the organism in its earliest form. So while you might not call the seed with the roots and everything else a tree yet, you would acknowledge that as long as nobody sabotages the growth of the sapling, the tree is inevitable at that point.
Absolutely. But there's a lot of statements that are being thrown in now that are, I'm not going to obfuscate, makes it sound really bad. I don't mean that, but it's clouding the argument, and I don't think they matter. So the seed is tissue. The seed is an organism. A corpse has a lot of tissue. A corpse arguably has more biologically going on than a 7-month-old fetus, which I would say has a bigger right to life than a decomposing corpse, right? But so the presence of tissue, the presence of organs, the development or whatever of some biological system isn't sufficient to say that something is alive, right? It might be one necessary condition, but it's not sufficient. It seems like in order to get that sufficient to be protected as life, we need to have that conscious experience, something that exists, that's asserting itself to exist. And that doesn't exist in fetuses until around 20 to 24 weeks.
Okay, well, in response to that point, I would suggest that sufficiency is a matter of personal taste. That you obviously you've drawn the line with the development of consciousness. I can respect that, as long as it's consistently applied, and obviously we'd have to talk and hash that out. The problem is that, as I said in the beginning, I'm not so much pro-life as anti-choice. I do not like the idea of people deciding whether a thing should live or die based on economic or social circumstances over which it has no control. The thing I always bear in mind with this is that the child didn't ask to be conceived. It's growing in the belly. It's entirely at the mercy of external forces that, as you pointed out, in the first few weeks of its existence, it's completely unaware of. The idea that human agencies should be able to decide whether, thumbs up or thumbs down, whether this creature should die or not, opens the door to all manner of horrors. And for this, and I don't want to take it too far off the path. One of the reasons I oppose the death penalty is precisely this reason. I'm not comfortable with state agencies having the right to decide whether this person deserves to live or die. There's one of the big reasons, because I should come clean on this. I used to be a teacher. And part of my high school teacher, part of my teacher training was I was taken on what we call an SEN school, special educational needs. I imagine you must have an equivalent in the United States. And the deputy head teacher.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The deputy head teacher, what you would call a vice principal, was taking me on a tour of the building. And he was showing me the work that the kids were doing. And these are kids with severe learning difficulties, severe disabilities. They're learning to tie their shoelaces and make a hot drink. It's very basic life skills. And he was talking about the nature and horrendous malformations. But we don't get many kids with Down syndrome anymore. And I went, oh, okay. And why is that? And he goes, because there are two theories. And one, mainstream schools are better at integrating them, which is a good thing. That's positive. But the other reason is the parents just abort them. And I went, oh, okay. And that issue, that answer haunted me as he took me around the rest of the school. And the reason it haunted me for a good 15, 20 minutes, I had to solve it, is that was a eugenics argument. The people had decided that because their child had Down syndrome, it was unworthy of life. It was unworthy of existence. Whereas I would argue that it falls upon a society, a culture, as Tree was alluding to, as was mentioning in her opening statements, we ought to provide more resources for people who, through no fault of their own, have difficulties and complications.
Okay, so
that's my position.
Yeah. Okay, so if possible, it would be nice to stick to one of these at a time. So every single thing here is just, it's a non sequitur or not relevant to the argument. So initially you said that anti-choice, whether things should live or die based on economic or social circumstances, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about if there is a thing to be protected that is being killed. Because we can all agree that if it's not a thing worth protecting, it doesn't matter if it's being removed for economic or social circumstances. The same way that I might remove a tumor from my neck, I might or I might cause a miscarriage or abort a fetus because it doesn't serve whatever purpose. So we're not talking about killing a child based on economic or social circumstances. We're talking about whether or not a life exists that ought to be protected. You make this statement too, like the child didn't ask to be conceived. That would be like me making the statement, how do you feel about something 5 years after your death? You can't, you have no feelings. There is no person or entity there to have a feeling. A child doesn't ask to be conceived because the thing that is conceived does not exist to assert its preference. It doesn't exist to assert any point of view. So yeah, it doesn't ask to be conceived, but that's as nonsense a statement as talking about the preference of somebody that's already dead. There's nothing there to speak of. For the first few weeks of its existence, we talk about something being completely unaware. That's my argument. There is no awareness. There's not even a conscious experience there. Henceforth, nothing to protect. And then when we say open the door to all manner of horrors, that's up to interpretation. I mean, given my subjective view of this, if we say that my interpretation of everything is correct, I would say that the manner of horrors it's being open to is forcing women to be incubators for things that don't even have conscious experiences yet. I would say that's a potential manner of horror. If you can see a potential horror that might logically flow from any of my stated positions, I'd be interested to hear them. I don't think there are any. I think I'm pretty consistent. That's why I started, how do we define death? And then I walked that back to how do we define life? I don't think I'm making any concessions about how we treat living people based on my views of abortions, whereas you necessarily are making the concession that a woman must be forced to do something with her body against her will to incubate something, which I would argue is a much bigger concession than what I would ask for. You talk about opposition to the death penalty, not relevant. You can support the death penalty and support or be against abortion. One is talking about whether or not a life is in existence yet, and the other is talking about the appropriate punishment for a moral agent that is making a choice that we all agree is immoral. One of those punishments could very easily be death. That's fine. If you're a moral agent and you're making a choice between one thing or another, part of that necessarily entails consequences to your actions. If you can make decisions, then you are ready to deal with the consequences, et cetera, et cetera. And then you talk about, a lot of people bring up eugenics arguments all the time. I don't believe people are against eugenics, and I don't think eugenics is in and of itself necessarily a bad thing. For instance, everybody will say that they're against eugenics, but then if you ask, why ought we oppose ancestral relationships? One of the first answers that comes out of everybody's mouth is, well, you can make kids that have like really fucked up bodies. You know, they might have Down syndrome. It's like, okay, well, that argument against incest is an argument in favor of eugenics. When you tell a woman, hey, it's not really the best idea to get pregnant after age 35 because the rates of Down syndrome start to increase dramatically, that's a eugenics argument. Women opting to have children earlier in life because they can have healthier pregnancies and have healthier children is kind of eugenics argument. So I think that there are certain types of eugenics that are probably very bad. So not having black babies or not having babies with brown eyes, that's probably not good. But other types of quote unquote eugenics where we're checking for fetal health, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. So to circle all the way back, I still haven't heard a single good opposing viewpoint for why we shouldn't value the beginning of life when the conscious experience starts, rather than when just the formation of some cells begins. I haven't heard any contradiction.
I think I can jump in and maybe help because I see where you're coming from, Destiny, and what you're trying to say. And I want to know, are you aware of the fact that scientists generally have trouble understanding what consciousness even is, and that we don't necessarily know for sure that babies, let's say at 16 weeks of gestation, do not have some kind of conscious experience? An example of this would be if I take a high dose of DMT and I'm seeing machine elves and I'm hallucinating all kinds of fun, crazy stuff, I'm having a conscious experience. But what does that mean, and where does the value of that come in? So I think to cite consciousness is somewhat arbitrary. Could you maybe give us a better definition of when you think consciousness starts, why you've chosen that as the marker, why that's the bar that you've chosen?
So I said at the very beginning of this debate, the reason why I chose, I don't believe that consciousness is arbitrary. I think for the purpose of a debate, maybe somebody could wheel that line out. But when we step into the real world, it is very clearly the line at which we draw between alive and dead when it comes to people in hospitals. This is not an assertion of philosophy. It's not a game that a neuroscientist might play. And it's not just in the domain of internet debate. It is a choice that is made every single day in hospitals all across the world throughout all the history of time, throughout all the cultures of society, for when a person is dead or alive. When you no longer can wake up again and be a conscious person, you're considered dead.
So if you knock me out, if you hit me in the head and knock me out and I'm unconscious and nobody's sure if I'm going to wake up again, it would then be ethical to kill me?
Well, if you're never going to wake up again,
how do we know if I'm never? Never is a very metaphysical, concept. How would you know if I'm never going to wake up again?
So let me understand. Do you think that these determinations are never made?
I think that they're made, but I do think that they're arbitrary. For example, when you said we generally pull the plug on people if we think they're not going to wake up, that's not something that I would necessarily do. And that gets into a whole nother debate over whether you think that life extension is a good idea or how far we should take that. What I'm saying is your argument is resting on the fact that if somebody is unconscious and we don't think they can have a conscious experience in the future, it's ethical to let them die. And as Kendon said, we know that babies will have, the vast majority of them will have conscious experiences if we don't kill them first. So I'm trying to...
can you tell me what you mean when you say arbitrary? I need to understand what you mean when you say arbitrary.
I mean, you're kind of basing it on a preference or something that's not very objective or something that you don't have a good epistemology for, something you don't have a good logical reason for.
So when we talk about the beginning of life, we're almost necessarily in some normative category because we're trying to create a definition. We're not going to find this epistemically, scientifically, right? So necessarily it's going to be somewhat arbitrary, of course, but any definition that you give is going to be just as arbitrary as any definition that I give, right? Whether or not we ought to value something as living, that is necessarily a normative position, right? You can't think of any... Even if you tell me life begins at 5 seconds past conception or at the moment of conception, I'm going to ask you, why do you value it at that point? And that's when the normativity comes in. You're going to have to justify it. So saying
that's actually why I would reject the idea of using normative ethics, because depending on, the time and the ethos that you are raised in will determine what the normative ethics of the time are. So I don't think that we can use just normative ethics kind of infers like a consensus, right?
Well, no, hold on. Can you give me an example? Can you give me an example? Just a very simple, quick statement. What is an example of something about when life begins that you believe is devoid of normativity?
What do you mean? Something
like what's a statement of like, this is when life begins that you think isn't a normative statement?
I think we know when life begins, but you're not hinging your argument on that. You're hinging it on when consciousness begins. And I'm asking you to tell me how we establish when consciousness begins.
Hold on. So all of us are trying to figure out like when human life, when the thing is like a human worth protecting. We're all trying to figure that out. So I'm asking you, what's an example of a statement that you believe is not normative, isn't a moral statement? What's an example of that? Well, they're all going to be normative statements.
So my moral statement, which is that if it's a human being and you intervene to kill it, even if it's in the earliest fetal stages, that would be unethical, because if you did not intervene, it would probably grow and more than likely grow and have a conscious experience and be born. You would probably say that that's not normative, right?
Well, the part that I would say is normative is when you're saying that like this is a human being, like at the very beginning of this moment of conception. When I say normativity or normative statement, that's another word for like a moral statement. Right. I would say that statement has some level of subjectivity to it. We can't go into the world and discover like, what is a human? When do humans exist? Right. These are statements that as humans, we decide these things. There's not like an answer.
I think we can definitely determine that something's human. Your argument is that it doesn't matter if it's human. It matters if it's conscious. Right.
Okay. Let me try this one more time. What I'm saying is that you can't say that my definition is arbitrary when we're talking about like, when do we begin to protect a life as like a thing that is worth protecting? Because every single statement is going to be somewhat arbitrary by your definition of arbitrary. All of them are arbitrary. There isn't like, this is objectively correct. They're all arbitrary.
No, I'm speaking specifically to your argument of when consciousness begins. Sure,
that's fine. I'm just saying that they're all arbitrary. So that's not. I don't think that's a good like contention of the argument. But I'm sorry. Moving past that one real quick. So you're telling me if you want to point to the idea that it's hard to draw some distinction between A and B, like when is a person going to have a conscious experience again, like in the coma versus never, and you're going to try to argue that that like, well, because you can't give me the exact answer for this, there's a specific name for this logical fallacy, but I can't think of it. But basically, like if you have two different categories and there's a lot of overlap or blur, and it's hard to distinguish one from the other, again. You can, what? Oh, I thought I heard him say it. Sorry. But yeah, if it's hard to distinguish between A and B, or there's a blurry line in the middle, therefore there's no difference between the two. That doesn't logically follow. For instance, if I point out,
clarify then. Let me clarify, because it sounds like we're getting off into weeds. Hold on. Let me finish real quick.
We're not getting into weeds. I don't like that you said that. Okay. So let me just finish this quick example. Okay. You're trying to say like, oh, well, he could be conscious, could not be conscious. If I were to show you a person and I were to stick a mini micro bomb in their brain and blow it up, and they had no brain left, but they were still like a person looking at you. Okay. But their brain was exploded. And then I give you another person who fell asleep, and I say, which one is more likely to become conscious again? You're always going to point to the sleeping person. So it might be hard to tell the difference between one or the other in a lot of narrow edge cases, but you can't use that to say like, well, we have no idea, because clearly we make these judgments all the time about who will become conscious and won't.
Perfect. Yeah. That's perfect. So tell me when consciousness begins.
So it's hard to know exactly when, but it seems to be the case that conscious is an emergent property from several structures in the brain that start to exist and communicate with each other at around 20 to 24 weeks during gestation in the brain of the fetus.
So we don't know.
Well, we don't know exactly. But
I'm saying is there's no ethical line you could draw where you could say this is conscious now and it's not conscious now, and that's where we can draw the line of where we can abort something.
When you tell me that I don't know exactly when it is, what you could do if you wanted to attack my argument is say, well, you need to broaden your range a bit. Since you don't know exactly, 20 to 24 weeks is not good. You should say 16 to 28. If you want to do something like that, then you could do that. But you can't say, because I can't give you an exact argument, that I'm incapable of making that distinction. Very, very, very quickly. Loki makes a wager with some goblins. Eventually he loses, and what he'd wagered was his head. They take him back to the prison. They go to chop his head off. So they lay him over the thing. They pull his hair up, and then they set an axe across the back of his neck. And he says, you can chop my head off, but you cannot take an inch of my neck. You can't take any of it, but you can take my head, but not any of my neck. And they move the axe back and forth, and they're not entirely sure where does the neck end and the head begin, and he ends up walking. It's called Loki's paradox, I think. Yeah. Just because I can't tell you exactly where one begins and one ends doesn't mean I can say, look, there is no such thing as heads or necks, because it's hard to tell when it starts. It doesn't work that way.
So what I would say to that is that if you, to hinge your entire ethical argument on consciousness and when consciousness begins, when we cannot even quantify what a valuable conscious experience is. If I'm dreaming, am I conscious? Am I not? If I'm DMT tripping, am I conscious? Am I not? If I'm 18 weeks gestation versus 24 weeks gestation, am I conscious or am I not? I would say that it makes much more sense logically to say we're not going to intervene and kill something before it can have a conscious experience, because that's our preference, because it would be either more convenient for us, it would be less hardships for us, because we foresee that the child might not have a good future.
I'm not
saying
making
these are all very bad.
any of those arguments. I'm not making any of those arguments.
You're not making those arguments.
To be clear, also every argument you're making can be very easily addressed. When you take DMT or when you're dreaming, even if you were to temporarily completely cease your conscious experience, you already existed and you already asserted something. If Rachel says, I'm going to do this, but don't let me die, and then you disappear from
they do exist.
No,
you're just saying we're not talking about
yet.
No,
you're
not saying that if it's not conscious yet, it doesn't matter if it already
No one
exists.
here is denying that fetuses exist.
If you stop it from having the conscious experience, then it can't have it.
No one is saying whether or not fetuses exist. We all agree that they exist. The question is, has there been a conscious experience yet to assert itself or any preferences? For Rachel, for you, before you take DMT. How does a 20-week
gestation in fetus assert itself
because it's having a conscious experience?
How do you know that? You don't know that.
Because the necessary, I don't know 100%.
Scientists told you?
No, you don't know 100%. Technically, if you want to get ultra philosophical about it, there's something called a philosophical zombie. I don't even know if you're having a conscious experience. That's not an insult, but we don't technically know if anybody is.
How do you know you're not just a brain in a vat? How do I know I'm right?
But
How do any of us know?
We can
this is a very silly place
to
base an ethical argument off of, in my opinion.
It's not silly. Only in debate terms is it silly in the middle of a debate. But if you step into the real world, these are the decisions that we make in hospitals every single day, across all of time and across all of space.
If you think that debate is silly and there's this delineation between the real world and philosophy, and that we can't use logical argumentation to determine these things because in the real world we just all agree, or in the real world these are all fallacies. It's a logical fallacy to say, well, in the real world it works differently.
No, I'm not. What I'm trying to do is I'm not trying to hand wave debate. What I'm trying to do is to take, because if I'm in the middle of making an argument, sometimes I'll take a step back and I'll say, have I committed myself to a position that actually seems highly incongruent with a macro picture? So when we're in the midst of an argument and we start saying things like, well, really, we don't have any idea if any conscious experience exists. We don't know anything about it. Well, let's take a step back on a macro scale. Do we really believe that? Clearly, we don't believe that. If we look at how we behave in the real world, if we look at how we behave in hospitals, where we're deciding when to kill people or not to kill people, clearly we have some concept of conscious experiences. When we look at how we treat people with medicine, when we look at how we analyze structures of the brain, when we look at where like death comes from, right? It's not when you cut off your arm. It's not when you lose a kidney. It's when your brain stops to function. It seems like we have some conception of where conscious experience comes from. So we go back then to the debate and we look at the microscopic arguments we're making to say things like, well, we don't know anything about conscious experience. It seems a little bit, it seems like not the best faith of an argument. It seems like a debate argument, because that's not true. All of us have some concept of like how consciousness works and how we decide when people are dead.
Yeah, I don't want to soak up the whole entire debate with you and I going back and forth on epistemology and philosophy and logical argumentation. So we'll just kind of leave that there for right now. I think we've kind of exhausted that, and we'll let the other two panelists say some things.
Rachel and Kendon, are you both life absolutists?
You'd have to define the phrase.
Can you define that? Yeah.
Meaning that everybody should live no matter what. Under no circumstances, no one should die under any circumstances. Actually, I'll even say under no circumstances should anyone be killed.
I would not be a life absolutist.
There are too many variables there.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the case of self-defense, I know there are people like Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, who refuse to defend themselves even if someone comes at them with a knife. I'm not one of those people. Because in that situation, for example, in the case of self-defense, if there's a chance that one of you is going to go down, it's almost an animal reflex to defend yourself. So if you believe that if what you mean by life absolutist is someone who cannot think of a situation in which killing of another human being would ever be permissible, then no, I'm not one of those people.
Okay.
There must be exceptions to. I hate absolute rules. There must be an exception to an absolute rule. If you see what I mean. If that's not an absurd thing to say. Rachel, but there are certain decisions.
Rachel, can you kill the spirit?
No.
So what's the problem with abortion as a Christian?
Well, again, I don't know if I want to get into a religious framework because that's not really in honor of the panel. I don't want to sit here and talk about like theological concepts because everyone else here besides me is secular. So I don't think it's actually proper to get into God, because then we would have to define who God is, what God, which God.
I'll take your definition of God in the Bible. Is that fair? I mean, whatever God you want to say,
no,
I'll stand by
because people interpret
trouble
the
is,
Bible differently, even Christians.
Yeah, yeah, I was going to say as well that because it would put. I would argue that not that Rachel needs me to defend her, but it would put her on the spot because, of course, any religious argument she makes in defence of the pro-life position can be easily dismissed with, because I'm not religious, so it doesn't matter.
True,
that kind of invalidates the position.
That's true for you, Kendon. But when I'm talking to Rachel, I want to see what is the root cause of why she really is against abortion, because, if you're saying killing, then I would object to saying, well, you can't kill the spirit. And that's why I asked her.
That's why I'm not making a religious argument. I'm making an ethical argument.
Could spirit be spiritual too? I mean, does it really have to be religious?
Yes, but you're forming a straw man because I'm not making that argument. That's not the argument I'm making. I'm
asking a question. I didn't even frame nothing. I asked you a question. I asked you,
you could ask me what my favorite color is or what my favorite dessert is, but we're here to debate the topic, and that's not my argument. You accused me
of straw manning you, and I'm saying, no, I did not. You're lying on me again. I asked you a question. I asked you, lying. Do you? Yeah, you did. I asked you,
everything I say that you don't like is lying.
No, I mean, no. Did I not? Yes or no? Did I not ask you, can you kill the spirit? Did I not ask you that?
Yeah, and I said no.
So how was that straw manning you?
Because then you went in to say, like, well, if God does this, or tell me why God says we can't have abortions. And
I didn't say that. I did not say that.
Okay, I answered your question. I answered your question. So are you going to actually make an argument? I was about to make an argument till you basically interrupted me by saying that and falsely accusing me lying, saying that I straw man you, and I just showed you I didn't. Okay. So the reason my argument is like, I don't believe you can kill anything. Okay. And by the way, I'm agnostic. I'm not religious. So and I know Christians who also, everybody on several faiths believe that you can't kill energy. So I wanted to know, like, what's the big deal? I totally get the argument of conscious, not conscious, sentient, I get that. Okay. I just wanted to get a grasp on what is the root problem to terminating an abortion, kill the baby, whatever you want to name it. So did you just tell me that because you can't kill energy?
I didn't tell you anything. I just said.
You just said, I don't believe you can kill energy.
Right.
Right. And did you say that, would you agree then that you can't kill the spirit, as you put it?
Well, I'm not religious, but that's why I'm asking. Okay. But I'll go ahead and say, I'm not asking, but I'll just say, sure, you can't kill the spirit. Go ahead.
So then by that extension, I'm going to try again to help you understand the logical extensions of the arguments you make, which is then it's no problem if I kill you right now. Because I can't kill your spirit, I can't kill your energy. What's the big deal? You're going to reincarnate. You're going to still exist in some form. It's just a dead end. It's a total non sequitur. It's not even worth considering when we're trying to have an argument here.
Well, killing me right now is against the law, and nice try. You wouldn't even have that opportunity before I get you first. And
I don't know about that. I'm a firearms instructor and I teach defense. Yeah.
You don't know nothing.
Well, you're trying to get all bad on me, so I just
I'm just saying, do you know my firearm experience? Okay.
Do you know mine?
No, you just assume that you can get me.
But you're trying to, ma'am, I'm with all due respect. But anyway,
let me get back on
your head here. And you don't understand how to make a logical argument.
You just tried to do a dick measuring contest with me, and I just took you on it. Okay, so here's my thing. So let me go ahead and finish saying what I got to say. So,
Destiny, I'm sorry that this person is.
I'm enjoying this. I'm having fun.
This person.
Yeah, what do you mean by this person?
I mean, so you want to dehumanize me now?
No,
How
I'm
white of
saying,
you, okay?
I'm
I can
saying
play that
that
game
you
too, okay?
do not understand the basic framework of logical argumentation. You'll take a position that can be extrapolated to something
You always
absurd, and you don't even
reframe
understand
arguments
you're
when
doing
you're
that.
losing.
No,
That's what that is. You
I'm
did
not
it with,
reframing
you did it with
anything.
me, and you did it
I
with
am
Destiny.
following the logic of your position, ma'am.
No,
That's
you're
what I'm
not. No,
doing.
you're not. Stop lying again. So, okay, here's my. I want to get back to the argument on what I said in my opening statement. To try to ban abortion is like a slippery slope. Do y'all want to go to now banning Plan B next? When will it stop? I mean, right now, abortion is legal.
What is Plan B?
Plan B is a pill. If you have sex and if the condom broke or it was unprotected or if you raped or stuff like that, and you believe that you're about to get pregnant, you take this pill. It's called Plan B pill that will prevent a fertilized egg from attaching to the walls of a uterus. So in other words, that is, if you really want to be technical, that is a way of aborting a child because you're preventing a fertilized egg from attaching to the uterus, therefore being discharged through the cervix and out of the vagina and dying out.
The only nuance I would draw there is that if you're still talking about tissue, then it doesn't vex me too much. I'm also rather soft on the topic. Probably I shouldn't use this the way I'm going to phrase this poorly, but in cases of rape, I understand that because it's not just a physical but also a psychic trauma, and I'm also a coward, I couldn't look a rape victim in the eye and say, well, tough. I couldn't do that. Now, if that's an inconsistency in my argument, then that's fair enough, and people can take it to pieces if they want to.
No.
But because I couldn't, so if let's make this personal to Tree, right? I'm going to make this personal to you, right? If you told me that you were pregnant and you were pregnant through rape, I couldn't say, well, sorry, you got to bear the child if you're a rapist. Because I know I can't do that. I don't have the stones to do that. When it comes to that particular scenario, I tend to be rather soft. I'm still killing a child. I'd still maintain that position. Also, when it comes to medical abortions, medically necessary abortions like ectopic pregnancies, that's a non-issue for me because obviously in that scenario, the baby dies either way. My fundamental, sort of abortion argument, anti-abortion argument, is that you could draw the line at consciousness, but we don't even know if consciousness exists. You could talk about, the quality of life when it's born, but who's to say whether someone's quality of life, who sets up the scale? There are certain decisions that I don't believe human agencies should make, and one of them is whether an entire human timeline, because that's ultimately what we're talking about here, an entire human timeline should be snuffed out before it's emerged from the uterus. That's my fundamental pro-life position or anti-choice position. So I don't know what you're supposed to do with that. I've just dropped that there. You can pick it up and do what you like with it.
Well, okay. Well, one last thing. Like I said in my opening arguments, why go for banning? Like I said, abortion is not completely banned throughout the entire country. I also, by the way, I saw your debate. You did very well. And I wanted to address something in reference to this. You didn't say this. It was said to you about back alley abortions. That's not going to be a thing. Okay. We have too many programs. We have too many foundations that will actually pay for women, no matter what state they're in, whether abortion is abolished completely or if it's a heartbeat bill. They will pay for that woman to get a ticket to a pro-abortion state to have that abortion, and they will provide her medical needs as well as her room service and her travel fees. So this whole argument of we're going back to the co-hangers, that's not a thing. So I just want to let you know. Yeah. With that being said,
I'm sure that's true. No, I said I'm sure that's true. Yes, when I was talking about my debate with Stardust.
Even Canada has stated that they will pay for abortions. You have Amazon. You have there's so many corporations out there that specifically stated that they will pay for a woman's abortion.
But can I pick up on that, Tree? Is that all right?
Sure.
Yeah. The reason why in my opinion, the reasons why these big companies, well, there are two reasons why these big companies are prepared to sponsor their employees to fly to, California.
Because they don't want to pay for the maternity leave.
They don't want to pay for the maternity leave. They don't want to lose. They don't. Yeah. Now, if we're talking about the ethics of abortion, I would argue that that's a complete abnegation of the topic, because what you're doing is what these companies are doing is saying, well, we could sponsor young mothers and make sure they've got diapers and formula and baby grows and things like that, or we could just pay this bitch to kill her unborn kid. That's the cheaper option, and as a corporate entity, that's the decision we're going to make, and
Not
that is so
only that,
callous and cold and calculating.
You can
it's
look
actually
at history
revolting.
and see
Oh my God, I am still listening to Kendon, and you are butting in, Rachel, as always. Kendon, can you please finish your argument? I was enjoying you thoroughly before you was rudely interrupted by her. Sorry, please pick up what you were saying.
But I was going to say, well, Rachel, I'm sure Rachel was.
You haven't really been talking that much, so I would like to hear more of your voice than her voice, if you don't mind. But go ahead.
Well, my argument is that the only reason these big companies are paying women to fly to, I don't know, Honolulu or wherever they're going to have these clinics to have these procedures is because it's the cheaper option. And if you remember when my opening arguments, I said most of the arguments for abortion are purely socioeconomic, like someone of your background, Tree, born in hardship, raised by abusive parents or whatever, or callous people. Those are problems we can address. But my argument is that abortion is used as a kind of ejection button. It's like, or the emergency chute or whatever. It's like, right, well, we'll ignore all the social problems that affect. And I realise that you live in a different country. I don't know where in America you are, but I'm in Georgia. Oh, you're in Georgia, right? Well, I'm one of the few British people I know who's been to the south side of Chicago, and I've seen areas of greater New York City that are a bit run down. And I can imagine that it'd be sorely tempting that if you were pregnant and you lived in those circumstances to go, right, well, I can't raise a kid here because I live in a slum, so I'm going to destroy this child. Whereas my argument is that if you deny that option, that get out clause, it would encourage, hopefully, people to provide all of the welfare reforms that you mentioned in your opening statement, such as...
Do you really think our government would do that, though? Seriously, our government is shit, okay? Let me repeat your argument back to you, so I'm not accusing of not knowing your logic. You're saying that if we allow abortion to be illegal, this will force, if not encourage, facilities, including the government, to impose upon good Medicaid, good Medicare, and also good programs to help not eliminate child poverty, but relieve it tremendously. Did I understand it correctly? It would encourage them to do something. Okay.
Force is probably the wrong verb.
Okay, now
because obviously because my thinking is entirely wishful. I recognise that the United States, well, it seems to think that all welfare is communism or something, and it's not very keen on it. A blended system of like capitalist economic forces and social welfare provision. It seems like a difficult marriage, a troubled marriage for the United States. But it certainly would encourage it. It would strengthen the arguments for any kind of welfare provision. Whether it actually works or not is something that, well, you're all American, aren't you? You tell me. Whether it actually works or you live there, I'm merely spitballing. But my argument would be is that there is simply no incentive. If it's cheaper to just exterminate human beings before they're born, that's the option everyone's going to go for. And anything like, school sure starts or food stamps or whatever, that stuff will never improve because there's no incentive to improve it. Does that make any kind of sense? Yeah.
So the only thing I was going to add to what Kendon was, sorry, I keep saying Kenyon. I don't know why I'm saying that. Kendon was saying is that corporations have an even bigger incentive, which is not just the short-term cost, but the longer-term cost. We have data from a century of countries around the world that shows that where you legalize abortion, female participation in the workforce goes up exponentially, like by a large margin. I think it's something like it went up like 10 to 12 times in countries where they made abortion legal. So, of course, corporations have a very vested long-term interest in providing abortions to females that they want to have in the workforce. That's all I was going to say.
Well, I was going to say, and if I can pick up on that, Rachel, one of the other, you often find that a lot of people who are pro-choice are also anti-capitalist, especially in the United States. They hate the corporatocracy, if that's even a word, that runs the United States of America, and obviously lobbies politicians all the time and things like that. By constantly treating this issue as an economic one, a socio-economic one, and ignoring any kind of spiritual or moral, whatever philosophical ramifications, you turn, as Rachel's alluded to, women as well as men, of course, into just cogs in the corporate machine. And the advantage of having a home life and having something is away from the markets, away from the workforce, away from the factory making widgets or whatever, is that it takes power away from them. I would argue. Again, you want to tear that apart, you can do. Yeah. So.
I don't know. I think that when you provide excellent, and I'm speaking from experience. I used to live in Germany for 5 years. The maternity leave is 2 years. The baby,
is it too? Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Oh, they take care.
The Germans are doing it properly. Then I'm genuinely impressed with that.
Yeah, and it encourages the women to not leave the workforce, but also allow to have a baby. They also Germany also provide them not a nanny, but somebody to come and help, like clean the diapers and sorry about that, my freaking phone, to also clean the diapers and to also help around the house with the mother. So, this is something that should be here. So my argument would be, why not have that here in America first and then start going for the abortion?
Well, timing could well be an issue, I suppose, but you could. Why not? But why not do both at the same time? I suppose you could argue. Why not get rid of abortion and improve your welfare service? But the trouble is, as well, I think because Roe versus Wade in your country was. I don't want to say sneakily done because it was done in public, but it was slipped in. Is that the phrase I want to use? I think this has been a hot button. Since 1973, Roe versus Wade was put into place, wasn't it? Since the 1970s, Roe versus Wade has been a hot button issue. It's not even about abortion at that point. It's the way it was done. It was the way it was punted upstairs to the Supreme Court. It was passed without grassroots support, really. No popular vote. No consideration of state legislature. It's anti-democratic. It was undemocratic, one could argue. It's anti-federal because yours is, of course, a federal system, as you know better than I do. And so I think Roe versus Wade has been there like a thorn in the side of constitutional conservative America since the 70s. And that's why they're desperate to get rid of it. Also, a lot of Republicans in your country believe rather than having a bloated, centralized state welfare system, they believe in local government, they believe in local charity, religious involvement, of course, religious charity. They a lot of the people who oppose Roe versus Wade also oppose the very welfare provisions that I would endorse.
We're going to agree on that one. Actually, I'm going to tell you, this is I see the conservatives over here. They're so hypocritical. They don't want to take care of these unplanned pregnancies. They lose their crap when it comes to welfare. And let's not talk about anchor babies. So they sit up here and they hate when women have a bunch of unplanned pregnancies. They always want to do this fatherless home situation. But yesterday, they told me, don't you kill your baby. Don't you kill your baby because the Lord said so. I can't stand that. And I don't come from that position at all. I think hey, I want abortion to be available so that we don't have to worry about a bunch of welfare. Okay, I'll be on that hill but you cannot sit up here and deny financial assistance from the government, which my side bitch about all the time, and then sit up here and encourage the very thing that's going to raise our taxes and cause us to pay the welfare that a lot of people on the right don't want to do, the conservatives don't want to do with.
Yeah, as I say, I'm not addicted to welfare in the sense that I don't particularly want everybody to be slaves to a welfare state. But I recognise I've had this conversation thanks to James and Stephen Ryan of the YouTube channel Cider and Port. I don't know if he's watching, but I've just promoted his YouTube channel for him. This is where the conversation starts. It's not where it ends. And I think the trouble is, particularly in the American conversation, it's you're either pro-life or pro-choice. And that's it, and then, but there are ramifications for what I am proposing, and what Rachel is ultimately proposing is an increased number of babies in the civilization that we're discussing. So what are you going to do about it? It's exactly. No good. It's no good ensuring, forcing women to carry a baby to term and giving birth if mother and baby are going to die in the street because they're sleeping in a cardboard box. There has to be some kind of adjustment. Maybe not a massive one, but there has to be some kind of adjustment. So what was I going to put? I had a point and it's gone. I'm going to leave that there, I think, because I'll stop rambling. I'll try and remember what I was coming up with. Does anybody else want to tear apart what I've said? Destiny's been very quiet for a while.
Steven?
I don't
think any of the conversation topics are relevant to anything. I think that the only thing that matters with abortion is determining when it's a life or not, and that past that point, every conversation topic is meaningless. Because any topic you talk about socioeconomic or any issues, we would never, ever, 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 ever accept killing a 1-year-old child. So if we think that like a fetus is a life, then I don't care like what any other arguments are. You just shouldn't have an abortion. So I usually don't engage with anything past that distinction of when is it worth protecting and when is it not, because I don't think it's relevant.
Well, the only thing I would say is that life does begin at conception. Even the medical forces would acknowledge this. I don't think consciousness is a particularly good barrier because, of course, there's some debate about whether consciousness even exists. Because the potential of consciousness, like waking up from deep sleep or a coma, exists for most babies. There's very few babies. Stillbirths and miscarriages are fortunately rare, and as someone who's dealt in my private life, I have female friends who have fallen pregnant, who have miscarried, and who have had stillbirths and all sorts of things. It's worth preserving because it's a living, it's an organism at that point. It's worth preserving. It's going to become a baby. It's going to become a human being. And I find that all lines that are drawn about whether it's a true human being or not are entirely arbitrary. It's entirely down to personal taste, and I don't think that any human agency, whether it's government or religious or social, should have the right to determine whether something should live or die or not based on a definition that someone's written down somewhere, which is obviously subject to revision. There we go.
Well, okay, I'd be like, I disagree with every single statement you made. So when we say life being as a conception, sure, there is a life, some kind of life there, some kind of living thing, but we don't protect all living things. We're concerned with protecting human life, right? So when does that thing become something worth like protecting is the question. When we talk, we don't even know if people are conscious. I don't know how to engage with that. I think I've demonstrated adequately that like consciousness is something that all of us consider, and it is the thing that we consider for when people are dead or not. You can keep a body alive for a long time with a bunch of different fancy machines, but if they're never going to wake up, we don't waste the money to do that because there's no purpose in doing that. We don't say that things are worth preserving just because they're organisms. There's a million different types of organisms we wouldn't preserve. When you talk about the fact that it's going to become a baby or human being, it seems like you're acknowledging that there is a distinction between what it is and what it's going to become. And it is not the thing that it's going to become. That's why it's going to become that thing. And you do not have all of the inherent properties of the thing you're going to become when you haven't become it yet. Therefore, there is a distinction there. When we say that it's entirely arbitrary, sure, but that's not a way to get rid of any arguments, because obviously we need to decide at some point we're not going to kill 5-year-olds and say, well, it's all arbitrary. And personal taste also doesn't apply here because we're talking about social values for the entirety of society. We can't say it's in my personal taste to kill 5-year-olds. And to say that the government doesn't have the right to determine if something should live or die, that is probably one of the most important functions of the government, is to protect life. Governments will make rules on whether or not how we can kill each other or who's entitled to live or die based on like certain things. Like you're not allowed to just like dump your child in the street and watch them die, or you have some obligation to take care of children in your house. You can't just kill your grandma because she's really fucking annoying. So yeah.
I agree with everything that Stephen just said, strangely enough, except for the fact that I would not say that consciousness is the thing that we would use. It shouldn't.
What is your positive argument? What would you say then? I guess what is so you
right.
can give me.
So
a
what
position.
I would say is it is a human life. That we know for sure. We don't.
Wait, but I'm asking at what point do you endow it with like moral consideration? What does that happen?
immediately. Like
Yes,
you would have
immediately,
to, you would have to say conception, and my definition of that would be like implantation, because you don't know if a fertilized egg is going to be. There's no practical way.
Why would you say
that.
implantation and not conception?
Well, because up until it implants, it's not necessarily a human life. You can't say that.
So are you in favor
when
of like
cell division is happening or things like that?
I
Because
mean,
you just won't know. Like, what are you going to do?
Hold on. Let's say that we take an egg from a person and we start growing it in an incubator. Is this never going to become a human because it didn't implant in a uterus?
Oh, well, that would be an exception then. So if we did do that, then yes, it would be a human life.
Okay, then are you in favor of also Plan B since that prevents implantation?
I'm not really in favor of Plan B, but as a legal, so there.
Wait, you have to say why.
Right. I'm going to say why. I'm going to totally explain why. So there's a difference to me between the ethical argument and the legal argument. Ethically,
well, I'm only asking ethically. I don't care legally.
Ethically, I'm against it. Legally, I would probably permit it further.
Super eject the legal shit. I super don't care because we're not having a legal argument right now. So how can you be against it if you think that implantation is the moment a life begins?
Because I'm against any measure that prevents human life. So if you don't know, right? When you take the Plan B, you don't know if that egg is fertilized or not. You don't know if
we need to. You have to amend that statement because I'm guessing you don't think that like condoms are a form of abortion or something, right? Even though they prevent human life.
No,
right?
I think there's a difference between abortifacient types of birth control and non-abortifacient types.
Well, how is it an abortifacient if you don't think it's a human life until implantation begins?
Well, so let me clarify. It's not that I don't think it's human life. I was mainly making a pragmatic, like legal argument of
where I'm not looking for pragmatic legal arguments. It's an ethical debate. So eject all the legal arguments.
Yes, I think that any attempt to prevent implantation would also be an attempt to prevent human life from continuing its natural.
Sure, but if we're saying that preventing implantation is in and of itself immoral, then implantation can't be the point at which you say it's endowed with some moral consideration. It must be the moment before that. It must be conception and not implantation. Implantation is just another step on the journey to becoming a fully fledged human being.
Yeah, this is kind of
that's consistent. Yeah.
Right. This is the conundrum of what to do, is because people want to have sex. Ever since women's liberation, everybody
hold on, don't care. That's not relevant to the conversation. A lot of people also want to kill their fucking kids. I have an 11-year-old. I'll be honest about that, but that doesn't make it a moral right, or doesn't mean we can do that.
That's horrible.
Okay, if you've had a 2-year-old kid, all right. Okay, but
somebody, I love them and I don't want to kill them.
Somebody that wants to do something doesn't. We're focused on the ethics.
Right.
So I'm going to delete. We're not talking implantation. Right. We're talking conception, the moment of conception. Yeah.
Purely ethically, and this is the stance of my church, is that no, you don't try to prevent humans from being born for any reason out of personal convenience or anything like that.
So we're going to say the moment of conception then is going to be the moment that we endow it with all of the moral consideration that we would for any normal human being, right? At the moment.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, okay. If we have that figured out, why?
Why? Because as you said yourself, it's a human life. I don't base it off of conscious experience because I think that's, you get into some really subjective territory.
Okay. Do you think that like a corpse should have the same protections as a fetus?
Do you think a corpse is alive?
I don't, but your definition is that it's a human life. I don't know. What is a human life to you? What does that mean?
Well, okay. A human life would be if you can see cellular activity so bacteria is alive, right? I'm not trying to equate human life to bacteria, but I'm saying we know that an embryo at any stage is human life. It's alive. If it wasn't alive, you wouldn't have to kill it, that's my whole problem with abortion. People want to say like, oh, well, you're not technically killing it because blah, 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 blah. But you wouldn't have to kill it.
Okay, hold on. So that
alive.
Argument is total nonsense.
How?
No one is saying that you're not killing anything. What's being said is you're not killing like a human life that has moral consideration.
Well, you're not saying that, but a lot of people will say...
there's not a lot of people in the call right now. It's just me, though. Okay.
Right, okay.
So saying that like,
if
it's alive, you wouldn't have to kill it.
We don't kill human life, no.
Sure, obviously. By definition, we don't kill human life, or most sane people should say that, right?
Yes.
So, okay. So then backing up, there's a lot that... There's so many different... It's just... Okay, well... You say that it's a human life because you can see cellular activity. So I'll skip ahead to all the boring stuff and we'll qualify this more because I'm assuming you can see decomposition in dead bodies. That's technically cellular activity, but we'll clarify that you probably don't mean that type of cellular activity. We'll say maybe a nicer phrase might be some sort of like metabolic activity or some homeostasis activity where the body is
cell division, something like that.
Not necessarily, but sure, we'll say something like that. Okay. Even if that was the case though, okay, if I could demonstrate to you, if I could show you a body where I put a body on a table and I can hook it up to blood bypass machines, dialysis machines, everything, I can leave it functioning and all that, but I scooped the brain out, the person will never wake up again. Would you say that that is a human life?
No, because, well, here's the distinction. I think I can help you with this. We're talking about intervention, right? We're talking about human intervention. No. I'm trying to figure out what it is you're protecting. I don't know what that's what human life.
It's not life. It's not human life. It's something more than that because a decomposing body is human life. I'm trying to figure out.
It's not though. How is a decomposing body human life? That's bacteria living off the dead tissue. But the body is no longer
tissue is literally not, it doesn't all die instantly. It's literally part of the development is you from the moment of conception to the absolute decomposition of every last cell in your body is all part of your biological journey from start to finish.
No. I don't think that's so. Number one, you're relying on like some sort of scientific definition, right?
So, I'm trying to figure out what your definition. I'm not trying to rely on anything. I'm trying to there's some bounded area in here.
But surely if a human being is dead, if the bacteria are feeding off the dead tissue, the tissue is breaking down. It's not.
That's happening in your living body right now.
But
bacteria
Stephen,
feeds
the
off of
difference is you're saying if we could take all kinds of crazy measures to animate some kind of dead corpse.
Okay, hold on, wait. I have to. Wait. I can't let you poison the argument with words like that. Crazy arguments. There are bodies that can be kept alive almost indefinitely that are in like long-term comas in hospitals. That's not crazy. That's not far out. Not only is it not crazy or far out, there have been very real medical debates about this in the United States. I'm sure you remember Terry Schiavo, right? Yeah, these are huge issues that people talk about. So these are not crazy things. These are very real, very grounded, very pragmatic issues.
I imagine that technically if someone were brain dead, but you could hook their bodies up to various machines to keep their organ systems running, that you would qualify as human life. However, if the patient, let's use that word, if the patient were brain dead without the possibility of recovery, and therefore without the of consciousness and all the rest of it, of going into the world and impacting human society in hopefully positive ways, you could argue that switching off the machine and then harvesting the organs for donation wouldn't make much of a difference. But at that point, because it's on the downward trajectory at that point, if the person has reached physical maturity, they've suffered a head injury, they're not going to experience consciousness again, etc., etc. They're on the downward slope.
We don't know. I think that whether or not something is alive, we view fairly binarily in a binary manner. We don't say that since you're on the downward slope, now we're going to kill you. Like grandma's on the downward slope. We're not killing her, right? So I'm trying to find where the bounds are for what you consider to be a life worth protecting, because that's where I'm going to find where your definitions are. Because everything that's said so far has been hazy.
I understand what you're saying.
That's all I'm looking for.
But I think that there's a distinction between intervening to prevent a life from progressing as it normally would and intervening to end a life faster than it might normally end. I think there's a difference there. I don't think you can say that they're exactly the same.
Sure, those are different things, but it's not relevant to what like intervening to prevent what or ending what. Why do we keep
talking about corpses and how long we're going to preserve life versus the conversation about abortion is about people stop. The whole reason you have an abortion is to prevent that human being from further developing into
but it's the same reason why you would wear a condom or practice abstinence is to prevent the formation of a human being.
Yes, but once it's already formed.
Abortion isn't contraception because contraception takes place before conception.
That's great. And a fetus, the potential to become conscious is not a conscious being either, right?
Also,
I agree with you.
A cluster of cells are not human beings, actually.
Sure.
You're a cluster of cells.
But we're all
I'm a cluster of
cells.
clusters of cells.
Sure, but I'm saying that there needs to be something a little bit more, it seems, because when I'm pushing you on the what is a dead person or when are they dead, or if I scoop a person's brain out, even if I can show you all of the other organ systems are functioning fine, it seems like that brain doing something is pretty important for us to determine whether or not that thing is still alive.
See, I don't think that it's in the brain, and I think you're making kind of an unequivalent analogy by trying to say,
sure. Well, when you say it's not in the brain, when you say it's not in the brain, could you give me an example of a thing without a brain that like this is the life that it's to protect, right? Like
Destiny, if I may interject, sorry, this is one of the dangers with the consciousness argument, or the quality of mental life. If you like.
To be clear, I don't think I've had any dangerous parts of my argument. I feel pretty consistent with mine. I'm still pushing. I'm not even at mine. I'm trying to get one from you guys. But go ahead.
Well, no, the problem is that what do you mean by consciousness as well is the other problem.
When I say consciousness, hold on, you don't have to ask and pretend I don't have an answer. I can answer every question you have for me. So when I say consciousness, it seems like we have an awareness, and that awareness is an emergent property from the communication of several underlying structures in the brain. And those structures that are necessary to communicate with each other for the emergent property of our consciousness to appear seem to be in place and communicating with each other at around 20 to 24 weeks in gestation.
Okay, so what if someone is experiences a traumatic head injury and their consciousness is impaired? Would that make them a lesser life?
No, I don't think so. Having an impaired consciousness or a higher consciousness doesn't make you lesser. But you're still having a conscious experience worth protecting, even if it might be somewhat impaired.
Right, but do you not think that if a baby is going to develop a consciousness, and that's coming, that the potential of consciousness is just as valuable as consciousness itself?
No, there's no other ontological category you can give me where the potential of a thing is the same thing as the thing. That just never ever exists. I'm curious, or can you give me an example of, like, if I put together like a thing here and a thing here, and then somebody comes by and they destroy it, would you ever say, I had the parts to build the building, you destroyed my building? Or would you say, no, you destroyed the parts of the building? The potential of a thing to become a thing is its own thing. It's not the same thing as the thing it's going to become. That's not true.
Well, there are two problems. The gestation of a human being is a unique scenario anyway, but also if you're talking about...
But go ahead.
But no, but if you're talking about like that, you've got the bits of the building and you haven't built it yet, then you're talking about tissue, if you like. Whereas if you're assembling the building and you've put the foundations in and you've got the soups, the major structures in, for example, and then I come and knock it over with a wrecking ball, you could argue that I've destroyed your building, but the building was being assembled. So if
you would say you've destroyed the foundations of a building. You wouldn't say you've destroyed an entire building, right? If 9/11 happened with a foundation dug out and there were, no towers there, people wouldn't say, oh my God, they blew up two buildings. They'd say like they crashed into the foundation of a newly constructed building, right? That was in the process of being built. The thing that you're going to become is not the thing itself. These are two separate things.
Mm.
I think so. Backing up again, I'm just trying to figure out. It seems to me, I'm curious if either of you answer this. If I can take out. Okay, so here's a thought challenge that I would give to both of you. I would argue that I can remove every single organ, at least one organ, from any body, from any person. I can take any organ out and replace it with some kind of machine. I can give you a fake heart. I can do dialysis for your kidneys. I can process things through your liver. I can do all these things. But if I remove the brain, something has fundamentally changed with that person. If I take out the brain and I keep everything else working, it seems like something has changed there. Do you agree or disagree with that? Or do you think you can remove brains from people and still have like a functioning, like working human? You can just substitute that out with some other thing.
Well, no, I mean, it's, you can't communicate with the body once the brain has been removed. That's certainly true.
Well, so then let's say theoretically, if you believe that to be the case, now I'm not going to say this is happening, but let's say theoretically that a fetus had no brain until 6 months. Would you then agree that the fetus with no brain until 6 months doesn't even have a thing worth protecting yet? Or
no, but what it has is that it's going to, because that a brain is coming. And that if you intervene, that human life will be sabotaged before it's truly developed. It's not the same thing as removing a brain from it's a different scenario, isn't it?
Okay, so if I push you on this category, so when you say something is coming, okay, now you're not protecting a particular thing. It seems like you're making the concession that the thing in and of itself is not really worth protecting, but it's going to become something that will be worth protecting.
I would say no. And here's the reason that we're not talking about something composed of parts that's going to become a thing. It's human life. And we do have a scientific definition for that. When you have human life, you have things like cell metabolism, you have reproduction of cells. That's not something you have in dead bodies. It's just not true. Okay. Your hair and your nails will grow for, I think, maybe weeks, at the very least, it's days after death. But no, actually, I think I'll just
that's a myth. That's a myth.
Yeah, that's a myth.
The tissue shrinks. It's the illusion.
It's not that the tissue is growing. You don't have cellular reproduction and division going after the body's dead. That's not true.
Sure. Maybe you don't. Even if that was the case, if I can give you a healthy body without a brain, where the cells are still metabolizing and everything, it sounds like you guys earlier said that you wouldn't agree that that's like a living body worth protecting.
Well, again, you're talking about this is not analogous, right? To say, okay, there's a human life. It is taking its natural process. It is already a human life. And now we're going to talk about there's a body and we're going to do all kinds of scientific Frankenstein stuff to to keep it alive without brains or alive without organs. These are not analogous.
Hold
on. We're talking about intervention.
Nothing here is analogous. We're not talking about intervention. We can't even have that conversation yet because I still don't know what you value in a human life. The reason why I'm asking these hypotheticals is I'm trying to figure out, because however eager you are to attack my definition of conscious, you've given me nothing yet. Your
I can give you something right now.
Okay, but just be careful, because you keep saying things like human life, cell division, but anytime I've tested any of the examples you're given with a hypothetical,
you're asking
saying
scientific questions with your hypothetical. And I will tell you, none of these questions are conception. Human life is intrinsically valuable in and of itself. It doesn't have to already meet certain criteria that you're arbitrarily putting in there. It is human life, and the purpose of abortion is to come in and prevent human life. It's to come in and kill the human life.
But preventing human life isn't all wrong. That's what I'm trying to get a simple, narrow definition, because you would say condoms aren't.
No, it's something that's already wrong, and that's
okay.
It's something that's already alive, and you're coming in to end the life.
Sperm are already alive, so there's something else that's happening here.
No,
sperm is tissue.
Yeah.
The ovaries,
tissue is alive. Your body, the tissue in your body is alive. What do you mean?
It's not a human being. You have to have both.
Yeah, but neither is a fetus. A fetus is not a human being.
It is a human being.
Define human being. Now, I was going. Steve beat me to it. Define human being.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out what is like that when we say human being. Like, when does the life become that thing, that human being that's worth protecting?
At conception.
Okay.
Because it now has both sets of DNA from the sperm and the egg. If you intercede to kill it, it would continue to develop, and it's already human. You kill a tadpole, you're still killing it.
But would you say when you kill a tadpole, you kill a frog?
Yes. I'm saying you're killing a life.
We're not talking. No one here is arguing whether you're killing a life or a living thing.
It's a human, whether it's an embryonic stage, a fetal stage, or a fully developed stage.
So, hold on, wait, and then Tree, you can go. So, in my opinion, when arguments come to the point where you circle the drain this hard, and then there is like a hard pivot on every single question, I think that the conversation has run its course. So, I'm good on where I'm at for establishing my points. I think I set up consciousness as a pretty valid thing. I think I argue that convincingly this is why you're dead. At the end of your life, it's when your conscious ceases to exist. I've tried for like 30 minutes to figure out like what is your thing for life that you would protect, and I've gotten like 50. It's not that I don't like it. It's that every time I try to push on what about this or what about that, I get these answers like, well, that's a wild hypothetical.
They're not analogous. I know they're not analogous. Right. So then it can be dismissed. It can be dismissed without logical penalty. Human life is human life, regardless of the stage of development. Is that clear enough? Run downstairs real quick. No, nothing was clear in your definitions. Human life is human life, regardless of the stage of development that it's in. It doesn't matter if you're an embryo or if you're 90 years old, you are a human life, and that is worth protecting. I think that's super clear.
Define human body.
Well, this is the problem, because what I think the frustration is
Q&A
that because different. Say again.
Q&A coming in soon.
Okay.
Let
them answer my question, and then I'll drop everything to it.
The problem is, Tree, is that because one of the reasons I love coming onto debates like this, and James has invited me a few times, is because I always approach these debates assuming that I'm wrong. Because there must be, if I was right, everyone would agree with me. So I want to hear from differing points of view. The trouble is that I think, particularly with abortion, it's one where everyone thinks that they're right, and I think I'm kind of like that way too. The problem is that you're asking, how do you define human life? That has troubled philosophers from.
I've got a definition right here for human body.
Okay,
the human body is the physical substance of the human organism, composed of living cells and extracellular materials organized into tissues, organs, and systems, which is exactly what I just said it was.
I got to fact check you because you're known to lie. You said that's the definition of a human human body.
Yeah, go ahead and Google it.
Define human
I don't lie. It's just that you don't understand logic. It's not.
Okay.
The thing is that these definitions
I
have
knew
troubled
you lied.
people for
You
millennia.
lied by omission. Okay, the human body, the physical substance of a human organism composed of living cells and extracellular materials let me finish. Shut up. And organized into tissues, organs, and systems in the human body. So you left out the organs.
I said all of that. Back it up and watch it again.
She did.
I did.
She did actually. So here's the deal. What organs does a fertilized cell have?
Well, it says composed of living cells and extracellular materials and organized into those things. So,
and organized tissues, and it says organs
and systems.
Yeah,
even embryos have systems. That's how they sustain their life. I just asked the question. Is it alive or is it not?
No. I just asked the question. Does a fertilized egg, based upon this definition, have an organ?
It has systems, tissues, and cellular materials.
Yeah, it definitely has tissues, but it doesn't have organs.
Thank you, Kendon. Notice how you answered the question and she just skates by it. She does that every time. I asked, does this fertilized egg have an organ? She got, it has tissue and system. And then you just asked the question, yes, it has organized tissues, but it doesn't have an organ. That's all I wanted to know. And thank you for answering my question.
Well, but here's the question that I would put to anybody who's prepared to answer it. If a fetus or an embryo is not a human being, what is it?
Human fetus.
I mean, well, okay, but it's still human. Yes, it's still human.
I mean,
life.
a tadpole is not a frog, right? It's like one stage. Like a corpse is a human corpse. A body could be a human body. Fetus can be a human fetus. Like we can talk about like the biological body that exists, but it seems like the thing that we value, that we treasure, that we're trying to protect is the conscious experience. It seems to be the thing that we're aimed at.
I don't agree.
Okay, that's fine that you don't agree. I know you don't agree, but you guys never gave me a good
haven't given a good reason why that needs to be the thing. What if I believe that all human life is valuable, that there's a soul in the body at conception, in the embryo at conception, there is a soul, and that you don't have any better pushback. Then I would ask you.
I absolutely would. I would ask you, where is the soul?
It's not something you can it's not something you can physically locate, right?
And if it's not something that I can measure, I have no. There's no way.
Can't be measured either.
It absolutely can be in some ways. Yes.
In some ways. See, you had to qualify that because we don't. This is something that's hotly debated.
No. Hold on.
This
is your whole argument is Loki's wager that if I can't pinpoint 100% exactly what consciousness is, you're telling me that it is the same validity as your concept of a soul, which has no physical manifestation whatsoever.
Right. I'm saying if you're going to choose consciousness, I'm telling you that if you're going to beat back against my concept of a nous or a soul.
If you are going to employ debate terms and rational and logic and all that during this conversation, you have to understand the absurdity of saying that since I cannot give you a concrete 100% analysis of where this particular thing is, that that very concept becomes equal to every other absurd thing that I can possibly think of. That is ridiculous.
I understand that you don't like it, but what I'm saying is that we're on equal ground.
I'm not saying that I don't like it. I'm telling you that we're not.
I'm saying that consciousness versus the soul, we are on equal ground. You can't unequivocally prove in some sort of you want to prove
if I make a statement that there is a pink demon floating behind you that spins around every time you turn around to look at it, and then you tell me I think that there is like oxygen floating behind you. Neither of us can prove that. Are we on equal ground when we make those statements?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I rest my case. That's it. Okay, I rest my case. We're absolutely not. But if you think we are, then I understand more of your argument.
Okay.
This may be a time for Q&A. If you happen to have questions, folks, we have got to move fast because we have a huge list already. We're going to move fast. In the meantime, I want to remind you our guests are linked in the description such that if you want to learn more about their views, you certainly can by clicking on their links below. Al Dan, thanks very much, says murder is a legal term. Laws reflect interests of the state. How does abortion hurt the state? It's murder only if those who live fear for their life.
Well, murder just means unlawful killing. So technically, if anything is permitted by the law, it's no longer murder. Abortion doesn't threaten the state, and I don't think any one of us made that argument. What I think it does is it threatens, there's a kind of cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? A kind of the social value that we place on other human beings. That would be the only argument. But abortion doesn't threaten the state at all. In fact, the state would like pregnant certain women, particularly if they're poor, to kill their unborn sponges to reduce the burden on the welfare state. So you could argue that abortion is something that the government would be rooting for. I just don't think that it should.
You got it. This one coming in from Didymus says, owing a baby resources is not the same as owning it your literal body. By Rachel's logic, stealing is the same as rape.
What?
Stealing. Okay.
What? I'm trying to wrap my head around that one. I'm not sure.
This is again people not understanding that if you're going to make the argument that, hey, this thing depends on me for survival, therefore I have the right to kill it, that you can logically extrapolate that to say that children who are 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 6-month-old depend on me for survival. How dare they? They have no right, therefore I can kill it. And there are people who do make this argument. I think
the problem is that there's a fundamental difference between saying somebody that's wired to and growing inside of your body is going to be fundamentally different than an external being that exists, whose responsibility for life can be shared upon a bunch of people that are volunteering or being paid to do the work.
But then
wait. When you say that might be, what I'm saying is I am totally breaking the analogy. For you to say that everything I was saying earlier was disanalogous, your comparison is disanalogous. To say, hey, would you want to take care of my 3-year-old son? And you're like, oh yeah, sure. And then they knock you out and you wake up and all of a sudden you're hooked up to a dialysis machine where your kidneys are, and they're like, oh, well, you said you'd take care of it. It's the same thing.
So
no,
you're
it is totally not the same thing.
It's a responsibility argument.
No, it's not a responsibility argument. There is fundamentally a difference between somebody being hooked into and relying on your body versus somebody that could be taken care of by multiple parties that are being compensated for doing
everybody here understands that it's super, super easy. It's not like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This isn't Alien where a baby just jumps in your body and takes it over and it's like some kind of parasite succubus, right? We all understand how babies are made. We all understand how to avoid that. So
sure. So now when you say that, what you've basically admitted is you've conceded every part of your earlier argument. You said, okay, it is fundamentally different. No,
I still think
don't you in some ways consent? Don't you consent to that baby kind of taking over your body for a while? Which, by the way, that's not even, that's not, hold on. That's not a bad argument, right? There are arguments to be made, but by making that argument, you've conceded there is a difference between something growing inside of you versus a bunch of people being able to share the responsibility of taking care of an external created being. Those are fundamentally different things.
But you also can't say that there is no analogy, that it's not a logical extension. I'm not saying the two things are completely analogous.
It is a logical
I am saying it's a logical extension to say that if this life depends on me for survival, I have the right to kill it, that, well, then people will and do make the argument that, okay, what about a 2-week-old baby?
So
it depends on me to live.
The problem is you've created a slippery slope, to use the term. You've created a slippery slope.
Might be, but it's still valid.
No.
You've created valid.
No.
You don't like it, but it's still valid.
I can explain why it's not valid. So you've engaged in a slippery slope fallacy because you're saying that you've created one circumstance and you're saying that it will lead to the second. The first being.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I didn't even say what you're saying.
You're so rude, just interrupting you, Stephen.
Stop. You're saying that if you say something that depends on me for survival can be killed, then a 1 or 2 or 3-year-old child can be killed because they depend on people for survival. The only reason why this slippery slope works for you, though, is because you are uncharitably interpreting the first statement as depends on me for survival. But that's not really what a fetus does. The fetus grows inside of you while plugged into your body, depending on you for survival. It's not something that requires you to just feed it, to give it food or to change its diaper. It's something that is hooked up to your body, fundamentally altering your entire existence and growing inside of you. Now, once you've amended the prior statement to say that I don't think you should be compelled to grow something that's relying on your body, you can't jump from there and say, oh, well, then wouldn't you just say you kill all children? Well, no, of course not. Children aren't hooked into your body, relying on it for growth. There are external parties that can be involved taking care of that child. That's why your argument is disanalogous and why it's a slippery slope fallacy.
It might not be completely analogous, but what I'm saying is that you can't say, look, this thing is like, a baby growing inside of you is not any different than, have you ever had, you've got an 11-year-old, I've got a bunch of kids. When that baby comes out, it still completely depends on you for survival or it will die.
No, it
So
doesn't. Rachel,
yes, it does.
how
It
many
will.
times?
Unless someone else wants to take, and that's a whole separate
It is a
thing.
fact of the matter that you are dead wrong. How many times in the 9-month period that you were pregnant with any child did your husband carry that baby for you?
You're assuming that someone
I need you
else
to answer
will
the question.
No,
I need you
I'm
to
not
answer the
going to.
question.
It's not
because
no,
you're wrong.
I'm
And
not
then my
gonna
next
honor the
question.
premise,
So you
and
won't
that's
answer
not
that.
correct.
The answer I'll
No,
tell you
you're
guys in
assuming
chat.
that there would be a third party
I'm
that would
assuming
step
that he
in,
never
and we're
took the
talking
baby
about
out of your
logical
tummy and
extension
carried it for
of
you. Okay.
We're talking
So-
about the logical extension of
So-
the argument that she made.
The
We're
answer
not
to
talking
number
about
one.
circumstances. They're
So
not the
real
same
quick,
thing. It's
the
not
answer
the
to
same
number
thing.
one is 0 times. Then if I were to ask you next, how many times did your husband feed your kid after it was born? The answer is probably more than 0. That's the difference, Rachel.
No. What I'm saying is that although these situations are not analogous, that does not mean that the extension of the logic of the argument is not valid. Those are separate things. If you're going to say something depending on me, oh, well, because it's in my body, okay, whether the location doesn't have anything to do with the fact that that life depends on some outside thing to survive. You're assuming a third party or somebody else will come in. None of that matters. I'm saying it doesn't matter. I'm saying the extension of the logic of the argument is still valid. And
you can repeat the same words all you want.
It's true.
But it's not. Because if I were to ask you how many times,
like it. Again, you just don't like it.
How many times? How many times did your husband feed your 5-month-old fetus?
That is not the argument I'm making.
Never.
I'm saying
Ever.
The logic of her argument is,
and I'm showing you why your logic is breaking down, because there's a fundamental difference between taking care of like an externally born child versus a thing growing in your body. There is no.
So do you think that you just feed it like every couple hours and it's fine? No, it requires 24/7 around the clock care. It's just outside the body rather than inside the body. That's the only difference.
It doesn't require your 24/7 care.
It doesn't matter who is the caretaker.
It kind of does, because if women could take
that caretaker can kill the child by logical extension.
Rachel, if it didn't matter who would do it, then a 1-month-old pregnant woman would say, "Man, I'm just going to give my 1-month-old fetus to somebody else and let them fucking grow it." It kind of does matter, because that's what pregnancy is all about.
Well, and people do that, right? People have.
No, they generally don't. It's usually pretty complicated or hard to take a fetus out of a body.
Actually, by that logic, then why not just birth the baby and let someone else take care of it? Then, if you don't want that, why not just follow the pregnancy to term? What I'm saying is that
I will admit that I'm a guy and I don't know fuck all about any of that shit, because who knows? Okay, I did watch my baby's mom do that, though. It seems to be a pretty involved process for going all the way to the delivering the baby, more so than an abortion. Am I right or wrong on that?
Women are the gatekeepers of reproduction. That's a fact of life. There's nothing that can be done.
That's not what we're talking about. You said why not just take it to term? Because that's a bit more complicated and arduous.
Let's take it back to how you said that my logic is not correct. I'm saying, again, that it doesn't matter if it's inside the body or outside the body. The location does not defeat the argument. I'm saying that if you're going to make the argument that this life depends on anyone, someone, many people, one person.
Yeah, nobody made that argument though, which is good, because if we did, that would be a really good counter argument. But nobody's saying that.
No, you're saying that the location is the thing that makes it different, and it doesn't.
This one coming in from Do Appreciate It. First name, last name says, Destiny, I would like you to look into Biafra. What is that? And support my nation. Okay. We could use anybody's support. Please look into Nazdamati Canoe and our plight. Thank you for that. As well as Hypno Llama says, wow, Tree's logic is so broken. Destiny, don't pander. You know her logic was flawed. If anyone is dishonest, it's that.
About what? He didn't say which
line. Yeah, I was going to say, okay, he's made the accusation, but he needs to explain what Tree's got wrong. I mean,
it's probably some conservatives who's mad that I basically just called them out, that they want to sit up here and have black babies, and when they want to sit up here and cry about their 1350, no fathers in the home, yet still they want to sit up here and promote the very same thing that's going to cause that to increase.
1350, I've heard about this one. Yeah, no. I was only when I started doing internet things that I learned what 1350 was. It's quite hilariously stupid, but yeah, never mind. Sorry, carry on.
This one coming in from Do Appreciate Your Question. Endo says, Rachel, biologists aren't concerned with moral epistemology. Quote unquote, human is specifically a biological definition. Why is having specific DNA sequence inherently valuable? Substantiate it. By the way, pigs have 98% of our DNA.
So this was an ethical debate And if you want to use scientific terms like Stephen does to try to establish meaning, then we would have to get into a metaphysical argument about whether God exists, what the meaning of life is, what is meaning, how do you know what's good, how do you know what's bad, what are morals, like things like that. We didn't want to get off into crazy like metaphysical stuff for the purpose of this panel. So my argument was never that there's like some kind of DNA or some kind of scientific medical definition of life that matters. My position was that human life is human life, regardless of the stage of development, whether it's in its earliest embryonic stages or whether it's a 90-year-old person who's on their deathbed, it's still a human life. That's how I define the value of human life.
You got it. Thank you very much for this question coming in from Real Men Love Blueberry Waffle. Says, Rachel, are you being honest by your reasoning? Do you defend the infanticide ordered by God on the Midianites, Amalekites, and Canaanites as justified?
I can't speak to that because I am an Orthodox Christian and we are in the West. And in the West, the predominant interpretations of the Bible are Roman Catholic and Protestant, which I disagree with and I don't think are correct. And I don't have the time to do an entire like Bible hermeneutics for somebody to put those things in context. So that's why I stay away from those kind of things in these debates. And we just do it ethically, not on the basis of my Christian God.
This one coming in from Sal Willis says, because of Ohio's 6-week ban, a 10-year-old rape victim has already had to cross state lines to get abortion care. What happens if you have a nationwide 6-week ban?
Good
and
question.
How often is rape provable? I think that's for you, Kendon or Rachel.
Well, this is the big problem. One of the reasons we have such low conviction. I mean, I'm sure it's true in the United States. It's definitely going to be true in the UK. One of the reasons we have such a low conviction rate for rape is because rape is one of those crimes that's almost impossible to prove. There are no witnesses. There's very little physical evidence sometimes, especially if the victim has a shower afterwards or, whatever, it could be destroyed. So the proving rape, regardless of abortion, is always going to be a nightmare. In terms of pregnancy through rape that might lead to an abortion, those pregnancies are actually astonishingly rare. Most abortions are performed on healthy women who are conceived by accident rather than by force, and who just don't want the trouble, the inconvenience, the ordeal of bringing a baby to term. So while obviously, if we're talking about a young girl who's been raped, I mean, that's just horrendous. There's no way you can massage that. There's no way you can ground it. What we're in danger of doing, I think, is focusing on these extraordinarily unlikely plausible but unlikely scenarios, distracting ourselves from the main point, which is abortion is still killing a human being, and is that perfectly justified? So with that one, as I say, I'm rather soft on the topic of rape. But trying to prove it, as the question, as the interrogator has put it, it is hard. I'm not sure if I've got an easy solution for that one, if I'm being brutally honest.
You got it.
Yeah. So sorry for that non-answer there, James. I do apologise, but there you go.
No worries. Sal Willis says, I am a mother of one, married, and have an intrauterine device because I don't want more children. If life begins at conception, am I a serial killer?
No, this is another time where when we're talking about logical argumentation versus people's emotions surrounding this topic, abortion is an extremely emotional topic. There might be things that are logically consistent and ethically consistent that are going to make people upset. This would be one of them. So that's why, I don't advocate for things like IUDs or other forms of birth control. People will disagree, they will get upset, they will get emotional. I'm saying it's still logically consistent that no, you don't want to try to prevent human life. You avoid sex then at that point.
You got this one coming in from...
Wait, real quick. So the answer to that question was yes, lady, you are a serial killer in
No.
Rachel's eyes.
I wouldn't call her a serial killer.
She
but
absolutely
I would say,
is.
No,
She's
I
taking
would say it's
active steps to
unethical.
prevent life, and she is preventing a conceived egg from implantation. She is a serial killer, or at least her husband is, because he's the one pumping the babies in.
The only thing is, well, the distinction I would draw, maybe this is where people want to correct me on this, is that if the egg is fertilized, it still hasn't started dividing necessarily, and it's therefore not
Right.
It's not complicated enough to be considered.
Okay, so then wait, hold on. So then in that case, it's not the moment of conception; it's the moment of first mitosis, or what? Like,
yeah, as I say, we're splitting. Well, I suppose we are splitting hairs, aren't we?
Yeah, well, that's
it's a tough. It's a
a
tough one.
At a certain point, you have to.
No, you don't. Well, if you're the reasons why you have to is because when you provide an inconsistent definition, that's when the 50 million asterisks will appear afterwards, because you have to keep saying that kind of is, that kind of is.
I provided a consistent definition. It's just
then call her a serial killer. Tell her she's a serial killer.
That's not technically true. It's not.
But she is. This bitch has killed fucking 20 kids by this point, probably, right? If her husband's come at her 20 times, there's been 20 conceived eggs. She's a serial killer. Or how many people do you need to kill to be a serial killer?
You know, you have some super vague definition of consciousness that you can't even pinpoint. So it's like,
are you conscious right now? Does it feel very vague? I guess it feels kind of vague from my end. I think you're pretty conscious.
Right? We don't know. We
truly don't know.
As though we are.
We truly don't know. I truly can't figure out if any other person in this conversation is conscious or not. It's so mysterious.
Well,
this is what I mean when I say backing up and taking a macro look at arguments. It's not. No, this is not a legitimate debate. The legitimate debate is going to be like, what are the precise areas? No, it's not. There might be debates about the precise. There might be debates about the precise mechanisms that give rise to conscious experience, but nobody's debating if we are or aren't conscious. Okay, that is squarely in the realm of esoteric philosophy that will write papers back and forth each other until you die.
Like it.
It's not that I don't like it. I don't like that you won't call the woman a serial killer when she has met all of your definitions for murdering fucking fetuses over and over again. I don't know why you won't call her a serial killer.
This one from OG Snoop says, Destiny, are people with Down syndrome conscious?
Yeah, they seem to have the necessary structures in the brain to have conscious experiences. So yeah, of course.
Made by Jim Bob says, Destiny, a human is and becoming at every moment from conception to death. Stephen was once a fetus, same human being, different stage.
And a building was once, a bunch of discrete materials. It doesn't make the discrete materials a building.
You're talking about composition, and that's different.
I'm not talking about composition. I'm talking about emergence and ontology. When something becomes something as the emergence of other things coming together, it does not mean that it is the things that was preceding it. So if I lay out 100 boards on a deck, I don't say, oh, those boards are a boat because I'm about to hammer them all together and make a boat. They are fundamentally something different.
The DNA is already combined, though. So
it doesn't matter. DNA in and of itself. If I cut my finger off, my finger has all the DNA of my body. When we talk about this is actually a topic of metaphysics, is substance. There's a difference between like the substance of a thing and the relationship of things to make another thing. An emergent thing that appears is fundamentally different than the discrete parts that make that thing up. If I cut off an arm and I hand it to you, or if I cut off all the pieces of a body and give it to you, I can't say, oh, look, it's a human. It's not a human because it's not put together like a human. The human itself is fundamentally different than the sum of its parts and the things that exist discreetly beneath it.
Yeah, there's an...
Endo says, Rachel, biologists aren't concerned with moral epistemology. Quote unquote, human is specifically a biological definition. Why? No, we read that one, sorry. Bowl of Spaghetti says, condescension doesn't cover up pure idiocy. I don't know who that was insulting. Who's that for? Coffee Mom, thanks so much, says, don't conflate abortion with infanticide. Thanks. Didn't anybody?
Okay. It doesn't explain why,
says, but... Just the obligatory, quote, what about the test of the unfaithful wife in the Book of Numbers, unquote, question for pro-lifers, biblical abortion...
I don't use the Bible as a source for this particular argument because that would be hypocritical. I'm not a Christian, so I don't know what that story. I've read the Bible. I can't remember that story, so I can't deconstruct it in any meaningful way.
Yeah, and I would give the same answer I gave earlier, which is that I don't believe you can properly interpret the Bible without the Orthodox Church. So that's why I don't argue these things.
This one coming in from Bowl of Spaghetti says, prove that there is a soul. What is the evidence for a soul?
Well, you can't prove the existence of a soul any more than you can prove the existence of consciousness. It certainly seems that way, right? We all operate as if there's consciousness. We all operate and act as if there's a soul. But what do you mean by prove it? Like, do you want material proof? Or, you know what I mean? That's when you get into, can you materially prove these things, or are we having a metaphysical debate?
What gives rise to a soul?
God.
Okay, if I show you a desk, does a desk have a soul?
No.
If I show you a human foot, does that have a soul?
The foot in and of itself?
If I just cut a foot off and I give it to you, does this have the soul of a person?
No.
So you can tell me where it's not. Can you draw some kind of boundary around where it is?
Okay, I will try to, but again, we're getting into a theological debate here. In Orthodoxy, we have something called an essence energies distinction. We don't think that human beings are just substance, and we don't think they're just energy. We think they're a combination of both. And we would believe that when you are conceived, you have something called a nous, which is similar to the Western concept of a soul, which combines your mental faculties with your emotional faculties and your spiritual faculties.
Where are the faculties found?
There's not a physical location necessarily, but when people talk about the heart, that's usually what they mean. Then again, you get into a metaphysical.
So if somebody
debate.
has like,
it's a physical location. Not everything. So like consciousness doesn't have a physical location either.
Well, yes, it does. It arises from a physical location. Yes.
A lot of scientists don't believe that the brain is where consciousness necessarily resides. Again, if
you can take the rest of this conversation, I challenge you to find me a single published scientist that thinks that consciousness arises from something that's not the brain.
I will send you some discourse between scientific philosophers.
No, I don't want somebody that does the philosophy of science. That's a fundamentally different topic.
The philosophy of science is extremely important. You can't do science without it.
Unfortunately, you absolutely can.
No.
So philosophy of science is a markedly philosophy of science is a markedly different thing than the practice or exercise of science.
Well, then you're a materialist. Then you're talking about only materialism. So then it's a whole nother debate.
Spaghetti says 2 questions for Rachel. Rachel, you were getting so much attention, it's not even funny. They said, should you be forced to donate organs to someone that is dying?
No.
And 2, do you understand that women can't choose to be pregnant?
I totally disagree with that. Yeah, they can totally choose.
No, not in my case.
Not in all scenarios, maybe.
Look at my case. We used the condom. It broke. Now, let's say, for instance,
what about for rape?
You just don't have sex, and then you'll never get pregnant.
Wait, that was not
if
the question. If
you just don't have sex, you can choose to never get. Nuns never get pregnant, right? Because they go to the monastery and they never have sex, and they don't ever have to worry about it.
The way the question was, the phrasing of the question was poor. The phrasing of the question was poor. It is, of course, possible for a woman to choose to get pregnant if she, because that's how people plan families, right? You can choose to be pregnant if you engage in certain activities. It is also true to say that sometimes a woman falls pregnant by accident. So she didn't choose to be pregnant.
Or without her choice.
Scenario.
A woman can be pregnant without her choice.
Yeah, but you can also, there is a foolproof way to not get pregnant if you don't want to get pregnant. And that is a fact.
And this is why Christianity is losing. To sit up here and tell people
I'm not
they can't
making
have
a Christian
sex,
argument.
It's just stupid.
That's a secular argument. I'm not making a Christian argument.
You don't want to get pregnant, don't have sex. This is so stupid.
It's logically correct and it's true and it's a fact.
To be fair,
is that not correct? If you don't have sex, are you going to get pregnant, Tree?
To be fair, Tree, yeah, abstinence, however unlikely it is a really good way of not getting pregnant.
Right. You might not like it. You might be emotional about it, but it's true.
Are you guys saying realistically that if you're teaching abstinence, which is what they're doing in the Christian church, and people still getting pregnant up in the church?
No,
no. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying people
are separate argument.
No, Tree. I'm not saying that people
Kendon,
are actually.
I'll answer the question. Yes, it's true. If a woman does not have sex, she can't get pregnant.
Exactly.
I will yield.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is,
I'm talking to him. I will yield to that. What I'm saying is that the question is, I will say that a woman, like you said earlier, a woman can have sex and choose not to get pregnant. She can use a condom. She can also be on birth control. These things are not 100% effective. But if she makes the conscious effort to prevent pregnancy and she gets pregnant, I believe it's evil to make her have a baby if she doesn't want to, especially if she's in poverty, and especially if she's 10 years old, as in that story you shared earlier.
Yeah. These. Yeah, that's good.
This one I gotta get from. Creep Fighter says, is the soul as detectable as... Okay, that's weird. Rhett X101 says, Destiny/Tree. If lines are arbitrary and meaningful conscious experience is hard to define, would it be reasonable to say a person with anencephaly has a reduced conscious experience and perhaps meaningless? Wouldn't it make more sense to put the line at the point when the equipment develops?
That's where I put the line at, but the equipment develops at around 20 to 24 weeks.
Gotcha. And Rage Pro says, congratulations on discovering fetal transplant.
Cool.
Gnostic Informant says, Rachel, what happens to souls of aborted babies? Do they go to hell? If they go straight to heaven for being sinless, then why risk hell from world sin?
Again, this is a conversation that I cannot give you my entire theology. It would take a long time to give you my entire theology. All the different Christian churches disagree on this. My church's position is that we don't 100% know. We rely on God to make that decision. We assume, and we think it's highly likely that because they have not been able to commit a sin, that, of course, aborted babies would go to heaven. That is generally the position of the church. But there's a lot of things that my church doesn't say we know unequivocally for sure because we don't know the mind of God. Again, it's a separate argument. I did not make a single Christian argument in this entire debate, yet all the questions are, well, if God real, why that thing happened? Explain, Christian woman. So that's how it goes, though. That's just how that goes.
Bowl of Spaghetti says, does Rachel agree with Noah's flood? There's a lot of going into Christian type arguments or against Christianity. Yeah. But we'll go into Roger Bernacki says, Kendon and Rachel, is there no difference for you between an abortion 1 week after conception and an abortion 1 week before delivery, such as maybe 8.5 months into it? If there is, then why?
The difference is purely the matter, I suppose, that's been removed from the uterus, but the result is the same. An entire human timeline has been stopped. Right. So, yeah, okay. An abortion not 1 week in, you're dealing with, I don't know how many cells. I dare say someone with a calculator could work it out. If you're talking about abortion 1 week before birth, well, I mean, you're just killing a full-grown baby at that point. But the product is the same. No more human life to worry about.
Yeah, it's just a matter of degree. It's just a matter of degree at that point. It's third-degree murder versus first-degree murder, something along those lines. I'm not trying to make a perfect analogy, but it's a matter of degree.
Gotcha. Endo says, Rachel, it's not, quote, this thing depends on me so I can kill it. Instead, it's, quote, this thing uses my body and I have a right to get my body back. Should people have that right to get their body back from it being used?
Well, the fetus has a body as well. The baby has a body. The baby is a body. And if we're going to we never really got into a personal autonomy argument on this panel, but it's one of the easiest to defeat because then you can just pose the question, at what point does someone have bodily autonomy? Is it at 2 weeks gestation? Is it at 6 months gestation? Is it after birth? Is it at 2 years old? There's a body in your body. You have bodily autonomy, perhaps, but why would then that body within your body not also have bodily autonomy?
You got it. This one coming in from, do appreciate your question. Farron Salas says, question for Rachel. Since you are relying on a metaphysical faith-based argument to bolster your position, like the soul, do you not see that as a defeater to your own position?
No, because all of the arguments I was trying to make were secular arguments, and Destiny and I have a bit of a history where we tend to push each other into this metaphysical area where we are trying to just deconstruct each other's philosophy. My arguments against abortion and my opening statement, and if I do get to make a closing statement, are secular arguments, which is that it has nothing to do with metaphysics or God or the Bible or my religion. They're secular arguments that are the same as Kendon's.
This one from RatX101. Go ahead, Kendon.
No. I was just going to reiterate what I said earlier in the conversation, which is if you are a Christian and you make a Christian argument, the automatic counter argument is I'm not a Christian. Stick it up your crack. That's why you can't argue these things with a religious perspective. Among religionists that have a shared faith system, that's fine. But if you're a Muslim and you want to make an Islamic case against abortion, the instant response is I'm not a Muslim, go away. And that. So again, there's no point in making religious arguments like that. Anyway, I don't know what that adds to the conversation, but carry on.
Red X101 says, Tree, if personhood is granted at conception, then would you also consider making an omelet animal cruelty?
No, because omelets are made of unfertilized eggs for a start.
I'm also vegan, so.
Well, I mean, I'm practically a vegetarian at this point, but no, you don't make omelets with fertilized chicken eggs. You make omelets with eggs. The egg is technically the chicken's period. That nothing's happened there. It's just innate. It's just tissue in a shell. So no, you
gotta have me and Tree back to debate how she can be vegan and be pro-abortion, because that's a doozy. We'll have to do that one.
Juicy. Tree, Chance111 says, Tree and Destiny win, in my opinion. You got a fan out there. Rocky Shepherd says, is aborting biological life being formed in the womb the same as killing a born baby?
No, because I would say born babies have all the structures in place necessary to be having some sort of conscious experience. And then once that experience is happening, you probably protect that experience. Like I've said before, I think that's about 20 to 24 weeks in gestation.
Rocky Shepherd says, yeah, I don't know. Kendon, I know that you're a non-religious pro-life person, so I don't know if these aren't super useful to your pro-life position. Rocky Shepherd says, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. I'm not sure what they're getting at there, Rachel, but I think this is for you.
Yeah, beautiful phrasing, but as I say, try to avoid religious arguments.
Yeah, and if
I try to avoid religious arguments.
If I was having this panel with people who wanted to do purely a metaphysical argumentation, I would take the transcendental argument for God. They might take a different position, and then we would battle it out on that. But that's not the nature of this panel. I'm arguing with three secularists. I'm not going to sit here and prattle on about the transcendental argument for God and all that philosophy that goes into that, because you guys are all just going to go, I don't care, right? So. They're separate.
Well, no, I'd be interested to hear those arguments. I just don't believe that they're, I just don't have any faith in them. So, feel free to educate me on Orthodox Christian views when it comes to abortion. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to persuade people outside the church, and that you accept that. So yeah.
This is coming in from JFMD. Says, MD here. I think they mean medical doctor. Rachel would help herself by studying neurobiology. They say all scientists believe consciousness is neurophysiological. How do pro-lifers justify that one body has a right to another for survival?
Well, that's the thing, is that gets into the bodily autonomy argument. We're saying both are bodies, right? The fetus has a body, the mother has a body. When you try to argue that with pro-choice people, they will say, well, yeah, but the mother has lived longer, and they'll try to qualify that the mother's life matters more because she's had more experience, or other vague argumentation like that. And it's if we're going to argue bodily autonomy, the fetus has a body, the baby has a body.
Wait, those aren't even the bodily autonomy arguments. That's the worst bodily autonomy argument I've ever heard. The difference is that the mother has a body and the baby has a body, but the baby's body is aggressing on the mother's body. That's the difference.
How would it be? See, but then we're going to get into a whole other debate, which I don't want to do in the Q&A.
We don't have to, but I'm just saying that the formation, it is aggressing. It's consuming resources from your body, whether or not you consent to it. That is a form of aggression, absolutely. Right. I'm just saying that if you want to have a bodily autonomy argument, saying that the mother's older and live longer, that's not the bodily autonomy argument. That's just some crazy Twitter argument. I've never heard that in my life. The bodily autonomy argument is you have a parasite inside of you that is aggressing against you, stealing resources, and is stealing. It kind of is, and is stealing resources from your body, and that's why you have the right to remove it. Is self-defense. That's the bodily autonomy argument.
There is an argument that it's actually a symbiotic relationship, because the fetus, as it's growing, works with the mother for its own survival. It's in the interest of the developing baby to keep the mother alive. Right. It provides stem cells and sorts of things. So.
No.
Well, then you're saying that reproduction is hostile. Wait. You're saying reproduction is hostile to the organism? That doesn't even make sense. Even if you believe in evolution, that wouldn't make sense.
It absolutely makes sense.
How would that make sense evolutionarily? That reproduction would be hostile to the host
what is
organism?
Morning sickness,
because
Rachel?
Wait, hold on. Yeah, Jesus, not even morning sickness. Look at fatality rates of mothers delivering children before we had modern medicine. You can't just say that evolution gives us an answer to everything very neatly and cleanly. Pregnancy and delivering children is a cost of survival. It's not a benefit to
so
it.
if you're having an ethical argument, you could say it's worth the cost, is all I'm saying. I'm saying that's a whole separate
Sure, but
argument
that doesn't make it a symbiotic relationship. There's never been a point in history where it was like, oh God, my body's weak and I'm fucked and I'm going to get pregnant so that my fetus can help bolster me. Like it's a two-player game now.
There's actually a number of medical conditions that do improve during pregnancy. That is a thing.
Destiny, I didn't make that argument. I didn't say that pregnancy gives the woman superpowers. What I said is that the word parasite implies that it just sucks the nutrient, it just sucks things out of the woman's body. Of course, pregnancies are difficult. Of course, women have died in childbirth. We are all aware of this. But there are elements of symbiosis going on in that relationship. It is not purely the fetus takes and the mother gets nothing.
I mean, if you're going to be that, then you can call literally every single parasitic relationship symbiotic, because parasites generally don't want their hosts to die. But I mean, it's a silly argument to make. Like fetuses are a drag on a woman's body almost universally.
It's one that I have seen embryologists make. So I'm only going by what medical journals I've read on this topic. So if you don't like that argument, that's absolutely fine. But I mean, I'm just merely pointing out that the word parasite is, because of its negative connotations, doesn't quite represent the relationship between mother and baby, mother and fetus. That's it. That's what I'm making.
Do you think that, I'm just curious, just so I can get my head straight, because I don't know. For everybody in this call, do you think that a woman's body is in a more powerful state or a more compromised state when she is pregnant?
I don't see what that has to do with the ethics of abortion.
You never ask a question.
That's a
I just can't have an answer.
She never answer questions when she gets caught, dude. That's her MO.
I don't think a woman is more powerful when she's pregnant, and I would imagine that she is more compromised in the sense that because she's carrying a baby, obviously her belly swells and therefore walking becomes incredibly difficult and things like that. But that doesn't address the point that I made.
Sure, right. But I don't think that fetuses in general are taking way more than they're giving. Is the point. But okay.
What does that have to do with the ethics of abortion, though?
It doesn't. We want every single argument isn't about every single thing you want it to be. We were having a very narrow description or a very narrow discussion on whether or not a fetus could be seen as like parasitic. By definition, it's not a parasite because we can't be a parasite of the same species. But in terms of function, fetuses are a drag on the host every time. So hence the aggression part, because that's what we were talking about. For bodily autonomy, the bodily autonomy argument is one of self-defense. You're defending your body against an aggressive parasitic thing that is a drain on you. And then I heard counter arguments to you guys saying, well, it's not always a drain, which is an insane thing to say about a pregnancy.
Well, I've had 5 of them, and I don't think you could really say it's always a drain. No, I mean,
Rachel, this is the most bad faith, unbelievably stupid thing you could ever possibly say.
Don't a bunch of you pro-choice people always say, well, a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant until like 6 months. If that's
6 months? Rachel, I am not an incel. Rachel, please, hold on, stop. I am not an incel.
Pro-choicers will say a lot of women don't know they're pregnant.
We're not here to talk to retards or about what retards say, okay? That's not what the conversation is about. You can probably go like 1 or 2 or 3 months sometimes without knowing you're pregnant. In exceptional cases, an anorexic woman or somebody that just doesn't show well.
It's usually obese.
Or maybe it can go 6. Sure, or it could be obese. Sure, I've seen anorexic women that don't show well either. There's a lot of very crazy outlying exceptions, maybe, but generally by most people are going to know by like 2 or 3 months that they're pregnant. Generally speaking, especially if they're watching their like periods and everything. Especially because you usually start to have other symptoms.
Right, but again, it's like if you're going to sit here and say, "Oh, a fetus is a drain on the mother," it's like, well, okay, but I'm a drain on society. If you get into a utilitarian calculus.
Oh my God! Hold on, I am so sorry. I forgot that I needed to qualify my statement 50 million times over. Otherwise, you're going to take the most bad faith interpretation possible. Let me amend this statement slightly for you, Rachel. Rachel, the fetus is going to be a larger drain the longer you get into gestation. You are absolutely correct. You fucking owned me when you said, "Oh, really? You think they're a drain? How big of a drain is a 1-week-old fetus then, honey?" You got me there. I fucked up. So let me go back and amend my statement and tell you that as the pregnancy goes on, it becomes a larger and larger and larger drain through the 2nd and 3rd trimester. Is that better for you?
Well, yeah, I guess, but
Okay.
it's arguable, and I don't think it's pertinent to the ethics of abortion.
Wait, you think it's arguable whether being 6 or 7 months pregnant leaves you in a more compromised or a more empowered state? You think that's arguable?
I think it depends on what you're talking about specifically, and that
Sure.
It's not
What could I
something we need to
possibly
get
be
into
talking
right now.
about where being 6 or 7 months pregnant is an asset to you versus a liability to your body?
Well, it's a great asset to me if I'm passing on my genetics. Isn't that the purpose of life? I mean, from an evolution perspective, me getting to reproduce and pass on my genetics.
Can
is
you
like
give me
the
one
biggest
thing that isn't the
benefit
thing
there is to
itself?
life.
So yeah, it is true that being pregnant, one of the benefits to your body of being pregnant is that you are pregnant. Can you give me something besides being pregnant as the benefit to being pregnant?
So you again want to a material benefit to pregnancy? Sure. As I said, there are many conditions which actually improve. In fact, I had an autoimmune condition that improved when I was pregnant. I felt better. I didn't have as many issues. I didn't have as
Do you
many
think that
problems.
autoimmune
Yes.
conditions, so as a woman that's been pregnant multiple times, I'm sure you've heard that with second
I
and
think
third
James
pregnancies.
wants to move on, but
Okay.
maybe we could do this on your channel.
Sure. I agree. I just want to back up real quick to show that, like, this is why I like to take a step back from the debate to see if some crazy shit being said. When you have people unironically making the argument, they're like, oh yeah, well, sometimes pregnancy is really good for your body, LOL. You can see that, like, on a macro level, okay, some wild shit is being said,
Sometimes it
probably
is
getting
really
away
good
from
for your
reality.
body.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes
Yeah.
getting raped can be a positive experience. It doesn't mean that we advocate for everybody to try it.
This one from Luis Montez de Oca. Thanks for your question. Says, for Destiny, do you believe that there is a difference between conception and contraception when it comes to protecting the potentiality for consciousness?
Maybe like when you talk about like the potentiality of things, you're talking about different things than what the thing is itself. Like that's a whole other classification of things. Like a potential life can be like can literally be like a sperm and an egg could be potential life when they're brought together, or a zygote could be potential life, or fucking two people going to a school dance where their son travels back to the future to play the right rock song to get them to fucking. That could be potential life, right? You see him disappearing from the picture when the guy gets into a fight right. So I mean, like a whole bunch of things could be potential life. That's just like a whole vague concept to talk about when you want to go deeper into it.
This one coming in from Chicky Nuggies says, Rachel, do you say that women should only have the right to her own body when it had been violated by another man?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not sure of the phrasing.
Do you say that women should only have the right to their own body when it has been violated by another man?
I think what the person means is, am I saying that women only have a right to their body when they have not been violated by another man? I'm guessing that that's what the person is saying.
I think so.
Yeah. I would say that the crime of rape is separate from the abortion. Again, this is going to be a very emotional thing. People are going to freak out. They're going to have tons of feelings, and they're going to get a lot of feelings wrapped up in it.
She wants y'all to have rape babies.
But logically, no, I'm not saying what I want. I'm not advocating. I'm not saying an opinion. I'm not saying this is what you must do or what you should do. I'm saying that the fact of the matter is that whether or not it's ethical to kill a baby that's a product of rape is separate from the ethics of the rape itself. So it's a whole separate topic. And I don't necessarily... My conception of human rights is probably not like analogous to what this person is saying, because they're talking about like woman's right to her body, and that's a whole nother thing too.
You got it.
Were you going to say, I don't believe that a woman has a right to her own body?
I don't believe that. I believe that people have a natural right to their own body in some sense, but again, it's whether we're talking about ethics or legality when we're talking about rights. So.
You got it. This one coming in from, do appreciate your question. Bowl of Spaghetti says, to rephrase the question, some women can't get pregnant no matter how much sex they have. How can people control if sperm meets the egg?
Well, again, go ahead, Kendon.
No, the argument is that if you engage in behaviours that you know there is there's a likelihood of conception, then obviously it is your responsibility to ensure that if you don't want to be pregnant, that you take certain steps. As Tree has pointed out, of course, contraception is not 100% foolproof. It's still possible to wear a condom and it splits, or there's a hole in it or something, I don't know. I'm just splitting a headache at this point. So I was going to say, James, could you just repeat the question for me to make sure I've answered all the points of it?
Yeah, it was just that.
If you would.
Said some women can't get pregnant no matter how much sex they have, and then they said, how can people control if sperm meets the egg?
Well, yeah, you could just make sure that the sperm isn't anywhere in the uterus. That's the argument, I suppose.
Right.
You could take steps to make sure that there is no sperm in your uterus. It doesn't always work, but yeah, you can work on that. It's a pretty obvious answer, I would have thought.
This one from Real Men Love Blueberry Waffle says, Rachel, if you thought God genuinely ordered infanticide, would it be moral? How can you dodge this? Let's see. You said, what do you think? If you thought God genuinely ordered infanticide, is it moral in that case?
Again, doesn't have anything to do with abortion, and I would have to give you a whole lesson on Bible hermeneutics in order to properly position that question of would God order infanticide? Well, it would go against the necessary characteristics of God, and we'd have to get into a whole separate debate. So again, sorry guys, I'm not trying to be uncharitable. It's just that I'm not a Western Christian. I'm not Protestant or Roman Catholic. We have a different interpretation of the religion and the Bible as a whole that is probably a little bit outside your purview, and I don't want to soak up everybody's time trying to explain that.
This one from Jupiter Darman says, Rachel says, don't have sex, don't get pregnant. They said, but Rachel, how can you say that if you believe that a virgin occurred or a miracle occurred 2,000 years ago where a virgin gave birth?
Well, I suppose if you are incarnated with the living God, but by the way, Mary did consent to that. An angel of the Lord came to her and told her that this was the plan. And she said, let it be me. So we do believe that she did consent to that. So there's that.
I'm sorry. I'm not trolling. Do you have a different Bible? I'm not trolling.
No, it's in the Bible. If you look it up, when the angel of the Lord came to Mary, she said, let it be me.
Okay.
So
this one, Pure Aussie Gold, says, pro-choice. People, you already made your choice. Now you got to be an adult and deal with it. How hard is it to use contraception? They said, I remember when the V was precious, but now you all want to play ring toss.
Wow, what a great question.
Well, there are consequences to behavior, and he's right about that. So.
This
like the consequence of hold on. We're not arguing about whether there ought to be consequences or whether consequences exist or not. It's whether we're killing a baby or not. That's the whole question, right?
And we're saying if getting pregnant is the worst thing you can imagine, it's going to ruin your whole life. There's a really easy way to just make sure that doesn't happen. That's all.
This one from
okay. Oh, James, what do you got?
Rocky Shepherd says, question is for Rachel. Is abortion of biological life in the womb the same as murder of a baby that is born?
Again, that's a matter of degree. Yes, it is, but it would be maybe closer to like third-degree murder versus first-degree murder. But yes, I would say that they both would be.
You got it. JFMD says, apologies, but Kendon's approach to let me know if I say this right, obstetrics is not correct. Yep. They said pregnancy is not symbiotic and can often be deleterious. And then in parentheses, they put such as heart failure, pre-E or pre-EF or HELLP, help, acronym.
Well, as I say, as I'm not a medical man, I'm sure that there are, what do I know about this sort of thing? But I do know from reading medical, so that there is some symbiosis. You do get some benefits from being pregnant in at least some scenarios. So I'm not suggesting, it's all glory and that a woman experiences no inconvenience or whatever. I'm merely pointing out that the fetus does actually give back to the mother in some circumstances. That's it. I mean, as I say, I don't have a medical degree, so I'm not going to be able to comment intelligently on embryology or anything.
I think there's an important distinction that Kendon and I would make as well, which is that I would assume he's on board with me in saying that in the very rare fringe cases that you have to take a baby early because of a medical issue. The difference is that in abortion, you kill the baby before it comes out. Whereas most of the time, things like preeclampsia happen in the third trimester and the baby can be delivered early. Now, you can deliver the baby, and if it does not survive, despite everyone's best efforts, that's different than killing it inside the womb and then extracting it, right? So in cases of medically necessary early delivery, I don't think anyone has any problems with that, but that's different than going in and, killing the baby while it's in the womb and then just extracting it.
This one coming in from only a couple more questions left. Neon Yor says, Tree, how does punishing the child for the sins of the father make sense to you?
It doesn't. Well, I don't know. When he said punishing the sins of the father, you're talking about like it. I mean, I was punished. Is that what you're talking about? It doesn't.
Yeah, I don't exactly understand what.
I think
is that punished for looking like my dad. That was the reason why I took a lot of blows by my mom, because I reminded her of my father so much.
Is that? Sorry for interrupting, Tree, but is that not a question about pregnancy through rape? The idea that the father has committed the sin by raping a woman, but the woman then aborts his child. The child is innocent of any crime. Is that what they're alluding to, or am I just making that up out of whole cloth?
I don't know. I don't know what there's.
No, there's not enough detail there, is there? Really?
Yeah, it's not enough in there. So
this one coming in from Bowl of Spaghetti says, does Rachel think women should raise SA babies? I don't know what SA means. This like South Africa.
Sexual assault. Sexual assault. Yeah.
Sexual assault. Okay.
I'm not saying they need to raise them. I know a couple of people that I'm acquainted with online who are pro-life activists who were the product of sexual assault. And they do argue that they don't think it's ethical to kill babies who are the product of that. I don't see why you couldn't give birth and then put the baby up for adoption if you didn't want to raise it.
My mother, a few years ago, she befriended a Jehovah's Witness, and as I'm sure everybody knows, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that abortion is murder, and therefore they won't take life in any circumstance. And she fell pregnant by rape. She was raped, which is obviously horrendous, and she was encouraged to have an abortion. She said no because it conflicted with her faith, and she had to wrestle with that. She's given birth to the child. She's now raising it, and the way she squares it in her head is that something good, the child, came out of something evil. That is one way of looking at this. I'm not saying everybody should think like that. I'm merely pointing out that there are people who choose to raise the children of those horrendous crimes. So I'll leave that as inspiration for anybody else.
Bull Spaghetti says, does Rachel not understand that women die from childbirth?
Sure I do, but we are not talking about women dying from childbirth. In fact, I'm not aware of a single medical case where they had to kill the baby in order to save the mother. Deliver the baby early to save the mother? Sure. Kill it inside the womb and then extract it to save the mother? No. So yes, women can die in childbirth. There are instances where you have to take the baby early.
We're not counting ectopic pregnancies here, I guess?
Well, ectopic pregnancy is not, there's no possible way unless they come up with some way to implant that. You can't do anything about it. Again, I'm talking about when we can voluntarily intervene to stop the life of a baby. That's what we're talking about.
Okay, and you don't think there are ever times where mothers might become so sick in the first trimester that like the pregnancy becomes incredibly like arduous for the woman's body? So like say for instance when she gets pregnant and then also discovers that she has cancer, that's like impossible? Or I'm sure there have been cases of this where...
I'm not saying that about a different...
Well, sure, I know, but in the case of like I'm only saying this because you made the really strong statement of like there's never been a case where you need to perform an abortion where the baby can't be saved. I'm sure there have been cases
I don't mean where the baby can't be saved. I'm saying like, so if that were the case, and then this is an equivalent argument, right? Where if it were the first trimester and something came up where it was going to be either a death sentence for the mother or a death sentence for the baby, then either way you're out of life. And in that case, I would grant I'm not going to sit here and argue that. I would grant that to you because it's not worth even trying to defend, and it's morally neutral in that case because it's a life for a life. What I'm talking about is people try to argue that, at 20 weeks, 24 weeks, 30 weeks, something like that, the mother develops high blood pressure, preeclampsia, or another condition. Therefore, they need an abortion. I'm saying at that point, you can deliver the baby, try to save it. If it doesn't survive, everyone did their best. There's nothing you can do. That's different than going in and killing it in the womb and then just extracting it.
You got it. This one coming in from last question. Pancake Great asked this very early. So we're going to get this one in. Thanks very much. Says biologists, they said, Kendon, biologists classify sperm as very much alive. Does that mean that sex without impregnation could be seen as genocide?
No. Sperm are not a species. They're not a genus. You can't commit genocide against sperm. That doesn't make sense.
This last one, the real last one. Aftershock says, for the pro-choicers, your hypothetical where a human's brain is taken out doesn't take into account that it will, they emphasize, get its brain in 9 months. not never, like the hypothetical suggests.
What?
They said, I was trying to remember where it was, the hypothetical where a human's brain is taken out.
Okay.
They say this doesn't take into account that it will get its brain in 9 months. Namely, that human that had its brain taken out will get its brain in 9 months. They say not never.
Oh, they were trying to point to some early. I mean, if you're going to get your brain back, then you would say like, oh, well, then because there was some preference that was asserted by something that can make those assertions, and it's made that, and then it's coming back. So of course you would respect it, right? Like a person going to sleep.